My daughter-in-law called me an old burden. 6 weeks later, she was living in a rental apartment. I heard my daughter-in-law say she was waiting for me to die. Not in those exact words, of course. Victoria was too refined for that. But standing in the hallway of my own home, holding a tray of her favorite lemon cookies I'd spent the morning baking, I heard every syllable through the kitchen door she'd left cracked open. She's 67, Lauren. How much longer can she really last? And when she's gone, this house goes straight to Derek. For bedrooms in Maple Heights, you know what that's worth. $680,000 minimum. We just have to wait her out. The tray trembled in my hands. 32 years in this house. 32 years of memories with my late husband Richard, of raising Derek in these rooms, of building a life brick by brick. And my daughter-in-law was calculating its value like a stock portfolio. 6 weeks later, Victoria was packing boxes into a U-Haul while my son stood in my kitchen, crying for the first time since his father's funeral. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the woman I was before I learned to fight. My name is Margaret Chen, and for most of my adult life, I believed that love meant sacrifice. That family meant giving until you had nothing left. That being a good mother, a good mother-in-law, a good grandmother meant erasing yourself so completely that you became invisible. Richard and I bought this house in 1992 for $127,000. It was a wreck back then, peeling wallpaper, a kitchen from the 1960s, a backyard that was more weeds than grass. But Richard saw potential where others saw problems. That was his gift. Maggie, he said the day we signed the papers, his hand warm over mine, we're going to fill this house with so much love that the walls won't be able to contain it. And we did. For 23 years, we did exactly that. Derek was born in the master bedroom during a snowstorm in February 1994, when the ambulance couldn't make it up our hill. Richard caught him with hands that had never held anything so precious. I remember the look on his face. Terror and wonder and love so fierce it seemed to light up the room. We raised our son in these halls. First steps in the living room. First words in the kitchen. First heartbreak comforted on the back porch, where Richard built a swing that still hangs today, its chains worn smooth by decades of use. When Richard died in 2019, pancreatic cancer, the kind that gives you 3 months warning and takes everything anyway, I thought I would die too. The grief was physical, a weight pressing on my chest every morning when I woke up alone in our bed. But I had Derek, and soon I had Victoria. They met at some tech company mixer in downtown Seattle. Derek was working as a software developer, making good money, finally stable after years of struggling to find his footing. Victoria was in marketing, all sharp suits and sharper ambition. She was beautiful in that polished way. Blonde highlights, manicured nails, the kind of woman who never had lipstick on her teeth. Mom, she's amazing, Derek told me over the phone, his voice bright with that particular joy that comes from new love. She's so driven, so sophisticated, she's going to love you. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. Their wedding cost $47,000. I know because I paid for most of it. Mrs. Chen, Victoria had said, sitting across from me at my kitchen table, her eyes filling with tears that I now recognize as carefully rehearsed, my parents can't contribute much. And Derek and I want something beautiful. Something that honors the love we share. I know it's a lot to ask, but, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I wrote the check that afternoon. $35,000 for the venue, the catering, the flowers, the photographer. Another $12,000 for her dress, the bridesmaids' dresses, the honeymoon in Maui she'd always dreamed of. Richard's life insurance money, the safety net he'd worked his whole life to leave me. She'll be family, I told myself as I signed over funds I couldn't afford to lose. This is what family does. The first year of their marriage was beautiful, at least on the surface. Derek and Victoria rented an apartment in Bellevue, close to both their jobs. They came for Sunday dinners every week. Victoria bringing wine that cost more than my grocery budget, Derek helping me with yard work while she sat on the porch scrolling through her phone. Your mother's house is charming, Victoria said once, and I chose to hear it as a compliment. I chose not to notice the slight curl of her lip as she said it. The way her eyes catalogued every outdated fixture, every worn carpet, every crack in the ceiling. I was so desperate to be loved that I made myself blind. The pregnancy announcement came 18 months after the wedding. Victoria handed me a small box wrapped in silver paper, her smile wide and bright. "Open it, Mom," Derek said, using the word that still made my heart swell even after all these years. Inside was a tiny onesie that read, "Grandma's little angel." I cried. Of course I cried. After losing Richard, after years of loneliness, here was proof that life continued. That love multiplied. That the house Richard and I had built would echo with new laughter. "We need to talk about the future," Victoria said that same evening, after the champagne, and the tears, and the phone calls to relatives. About practical matters. Derek shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Vic, maybe this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time." She reached across the table and took my hand, her grip firm and cool. "Margaret, we've been thinking. Raising a child in a Bellevue apartment isn't ideal. The schools here in Maple Heights are excellent. Derek grew up here. There's so much space." She let the suggestion hang in the air like smoke. "You want to move in with me?" I asked, my heart racing with hope. "No, no." Victoria laughed, a musical sound that I would later learn to recognize as condescension. "We were thinking of something more permanent. We buy a house nearby, be close to you, give you easy access to your grandchild." "That sounds wonderful," I said, already calculating how I could help. "The thing is," Victoria continued, "the housing market here is insane. $600,000 for anything livable. And with the baby coming, we need to save for other things." There it was. The ask. Always wrapped in reasonable words, logical arguments, emotional manipulation disguised as practical planning. "How much do you need?" Derek's face reddened. "Mom, you don't have to. $120,000, Victoria said smoothly. "For the down payment. We'll handle the mortgage, obviously, but we need help getting started. $120,000. More than half of what remained of Richard's life insurance. I should have said no. I should have remembered that I was 63 years old, with no income beyond Social Security, and a small pension from Richard's company. I should have thought about my own future, my own security. Instead, I thought about Sunday dinners with a grandchild in my arms. I thought about teaching a little one to garden, the way Richard had taught Derek. I thought about filling this house with laughter again. "I'll have it transferred by Friday," I said. Victoria's smile was radiant. Victorious, I would later realize. She'd won before the battle even began. They found a house 3 streets away, a renovated colonial with 4 bedrooms, and a backyard that backed up to the community park. "Perfect for a growing family," Victoria said. "Perfect for building memories." I helped them move in on a Saturday in March. My back ached from lifting boxes, my hands blistered from tape and cardboard, but I didn't complain. This was what mothers did. This was love in action. Emma was born on September 15, 2021, at 3:47 in the morning. 7 pounds, 6 ounces, with her father's dark eyes and a cry that echoed through the hospital corridors like music. I was there for the delivery. Victoria had asked me to be there, had gripped my hand through the contractions while Derek paced the hallway. In that moment, covered in sweat and tears, she looked at me with something that might have been genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered as the nurses cleaned Emma up. "Thank you for everything." I believed her. I believed we'd turned a corner, that the $120,000 and the wedding in the years of small sacrifices had purchased something real. A place in this new family. A role that mattered. The first red flag came 3 weeks later, though I didn't recognize it at the time. I'd arrived at their house at 7 a.m., as I had every day since Emma came home. Victoria needed sleep. Derek was back at work. Someone had to hold the baby, change the diapers, rock her through the colicky hours when nothing else helped. "You're here early," Victoria said, not quite meeting my eyes. Same time as always. I reached for Emma, already in the portable bassinet by the couch. "Go rest, sweetheart. I've got her." Victoria hesitated. "Actually, I was thinking, maybe you don't need to come every day." My mother offered to help out more. "Your mother lives in Portland. She's considering moving closer. To be more involved." Her mother, Patricia, a woman who'd contributed exactly $500 to the wedding and hadn't visited once since Emma was born. A woman who, according to Victoria's own complaints over the years, had been emotionally absent throughout her childhood. "That's wonderful," I said, Because what else could I say? Family should be together. But something cold settled in my stomach, a premonition I was too naive to heed. The visits started getting shorter after that. I'd arrive at my usual time and Victoria would find reasons to cut them early. She needed to sleep. She had a video call. Emma was fussy and needed quiet. Don't take it personally, Mom, Derek said when I mentioned my concerns. New mothers are exhausted. She's just trying to find her rhythm. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Christmas 2021 was the first holiday with Emma, and I spent 3 days preparing. Richard's mother's recipe for roast beef, my own family's traditions of Chinese dumplings and noodles, presents wrapped in paper I'd chosen specifically because it matched Emma's nursery. Actually, Victoria said when I arrived with arms full of food and gifts, my parents are coming. We thought it would be nice to do a more intimate celebration this year. Just the immediate family. I stood on their porch, snow beginning to fall, holding a roast that had taken me 6 hours to prepare. I am immediate family. You know what I mean. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. My parents barely know Emma. They need bonding time. You see her every week. Not every day anymore. Not even every other day. But I didn't say that. Of course, I heard myself say, I understand completely. I drove home through the snow, the roast cooling on the passenger seat, and ate Christmas dinner alone at the kitchen table where Richard and I had shared 30 years of holidays. The walls didn't feel like they were full of love anymore. They just felt empty. By spring of 2022, I'd learned my new place in the hierarchy. Victoria's mother, Patricia, had indeed moved to Maple Heights, into a condo I later learned Derek and Victoria had helped finance. She was present at every milestone. Emma's first steps, her first words, her first birthday party, where I was assigned to kitchen duty while Patricia held court in the living room. Your mother is so helpful, Victoria told Derek one evening, loudly enough for me to hear from the kitchen where I was washing dishes. She just fits in so naturally. I scrubbed a pot that was already clean, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. But I kept coming, kept helping, kept writing checks when unexpected expenses arose. A car repair here, a medical bill there, always with the promise of repayment that never materialized. Just until we get on our feet, became the refrain. By my calculations, made late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd given them $187,000 since the wedding. Down payment, wedding, baby expenses, the countless small transfers that added up like drops of water wearing away stone. Richard's life insurance was nearly gone. My savings were dwindling. I'd started shopping at discount grocery stores, turning off the heat at night to save on utilities, skipping doctor's appointments because the copays felt like luxuries I couldn't afford. And still, I gave. Because that's what mothers do. Because I was terrified that if I stopped I'd lose Derek entirely. Lose Emma, the granddaughter who lit up when she saw me, who called me Nai Nai in a mix of English and the Mandarin I'd been teaching her. The fear of losing them was worse than the reality of losing myself. I know now that this is how abuse works, how it creeps in slowly, wrapped in the language of family and obligation, until you can't remember who you were before you started disappearing. But in the spring of 2022, I still believed things would get better. I still believed that love, if I just gave enough of it, would be returned. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday in May when everything changed. The day I overheard the conversation that would finally wake me up. The Tuesday that changed my life started like any other. I woke at 6 a.m., as I had every day since Richard died. The house was quiet, that particular silence of a home that's too big for one person. I made coffee in the kitchen, stood at the window watching the sunrise paint the maple trees in our backyard gold and pink. May 17th, 2022. I remember the date because it was exactly 3 years since Richard's diagnosis. 3 years since the doctor had sat us down in that sterile office and spoken words that rearranged our entire universe. I'd planned to visit the cemetery that morning, to bring fresh flowers, to sit on the bench Derek had installed near the headstone, to talk to my husband about all the things I couldn't say to anyone else. But Victoria had called the night before. I need you to watch Emma tomorrow, just for a few hours. I have a spa appointment at 10, and Derek has meetings all day. Not a request, a statement. My plans, whatever they might be, were irrelevant. Of course, I said, because I always said of course. I'll be there at 9:30. Make it 9. I need time to get ready, So instead of visiting my husband's grave on the anniversary of the worst news of our lives, I drove to my son's house to babysit while my daughter-in-law got a massage. The irony wasn't lost on me, even then. But I swallowed it down, the way I'd swallowed so many small indignities over the past 3 years. I arrived at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, because being late was unacceptable, but being early was expected. The front door was unlocked. Victoria had started leaving it open for me, which I'd initially taken as a sign of trust. Later, I would understand it was simply efficiency. Why bother greeting the help when they could let themselves in? Emma was in her playpen in the living room, surrounded by toys I'd bought her. The educational ones. The ones Victoria had specifically requested. $200 worth of developmental tools that I'd charged to my credit card because cash was running low. Nye. Emma's face lit up when she saw me, her arms reaching toward me with that pure, uncomplicated joy that only small children possess. Hello, my darling. I lifted her, pressed my nose to her hair, inhaled the sweet baby scent that made everything else bearable. Nye missed you. From upstairs, I could hear Victoria's voice. On the phone, it sounded like. I caught fragments as I settled Emma on my hip. Something about reservations, about timing, about someone named Lauren. I should have announced myself, should have called up the stairs that I'd arrived, that I had Emma, that Victoria could finish getting ready in peace. Instead, I walked toward the kitchen to get Emma's morning snack. The organic puffs Victoria insisted on, $8 a container, because regular Cheerios weren't good enough for her daughter. That's when I heard it. Victoria's voice, clear and sharp, drifting down from the upstairs hallway. She must have walked out of the bedroom, phone pressed to her ear, not realizing I was directly below her. She's 67, Lauren. How much longer can she really last? I froze, my hand on the pantry door, Emma squirming in my arms, reaching for the puffs she knew were inside. And when she's gone, this house goes straight to Derek. For bedrooms in Maple Heights, you know what that's worth. $680,000 minimum. We just have to wait her out. The world tilted. I grabbed the counter with my free hand, suddenly dizzy. No, she's not sick or anything. Unfortunately. A laugh, bright and careless. But she's old. She lives alone. These things happen, and honestly, the way she's been spending money on us, she'll probably work herself into an early grave anyway. Win-win. Emma grabbed a fistful of my hair, nye, puffs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only stand there, rooted to the kitchen floor, listening to my daughter-in-law calculate the value of my death. Oh, totally. The house is just the beginning. She's got Richard's pension, some investments Derek doesn't even know about. I found the statements when I was helping organize her office last month. There's at least another $200,000 sitting there, all going to Derek, which means all coming to us. My office. The filing cabinet I'd asked her to help me sort through because my arthritis made it hard to grip the folders. She'd been so helpful that day, so patient, so kind. She'd been taking inventory. The best part? She's so desperate for Derek's attention that she'll give us anything we ask for. I could probably convince her to sign over the house right now if I played it right. Oh, Margaret, we're so worried about you living alone. What if you fell? Wouldn't it be better if Derek's name was on the deed? Just for safety. She'd do it in a heartbeat. Another laugh. This one made my stomach turn. I know, but you have to be patient with these things. My mother always said the best way to handle old people is to make them feel useful while you wait for them to die. Give them just enough attention to keep them compliant, but not so much that they get ideas about being equals. Emma was getting fussy now, confused by my stillness. Nye, down. Down, please. I lowered her to the floor automatically, my body moving while my mind remained frozen. Anyway, I should go. The old burden is probably here by now, ready to worship at the altar of her precious granddaughter. God, you should see her face when she looks at Emma. Like she actually matters. Like she's not just the free babysitter we keep around because daycare costs $2,000 a month. Old burden, free babysitter. The words branded themselves into my brain. Yeah, talk later. Love you. Bye. I heard footsteps on the stairs, Victoria descending, probably already forgetting the conversation, moving on to her spa day without a second thought. I had maybe 10 seconds to decide what to do. Hide what I'd heard. Smile and nod. Continue being the compliant old woman who made their lives easier, while they waited for her to die. Or, Victoria appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face arranged in that practiced warmth she deployed when she needed something from me. "Oh, Margaret, you're here. Perfect." She didn't ask how I was, didn't mention the anniversary of Richard's diagnosis, probably didn't even remember. "Emma's been fed, but she'll need a snack around 10. I should be back by 1, maybe 2. There might be some errands after." I looked at her, really looked, for the first time in years. The designer athleisure she wore cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The highlights in her hair, refreshed every 6 weeks, ran $300 per session. The Apple Watch on her wrist, the latest model, a gift she bought herself, from Derek, for Mother's Day. All funded, directly or indirectly, by the money I'd given them, by Richard's life insurance, by my savings, by my future. And she called me an old burden. "Margaret?" Victoria tilted her head, a flicker of confusion crossing her features. "Are you okay? You look pale." I opened my mouth to say something, to confront her, to demand an explanation. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'm fine, just tired. Go enjoy your spa day." Victoria's smile returned, bright and empty. "You're the best, Mom. Seriously, I don't know what we'd do without you." She kissed Emma on the head, grabbed her purse, the Louis Vuitton I'd given her for her birthday, $1,900 that I'd justified as an investment in our relationship, and walked out the front door. The house fell silent except for Emma's babbling and the sound of my heart breaking. I don't remember much about the next few hours. I know I took care of Emma, changed her diaper, read her books, played with blocks on the living room floor, while my mind ran in circles, replaying Victoria's words until they lost all meaning, and then found it again, sharper each time. Old burden. How much longer can she really last? We just have to wait her out. At some point, I found myself standing in their home office, Emma napping in the portable crib I'd brought over months ago. The filing cabinet in the corner drew my eye. The one where Victoria kept their important documents. The one she'd helped me organize my own files in, learning exactly where I kept my financial statements. I shouldn't snoop. That's what the old Margaret would have said. The one who believed in privacy and trust and the fundamental goodness of family. But the old Margaret had been a fool. The bottom drawer held what I was looking for, a folder labeled Financial Planning in Victoria's neat handwriting. Inside, I found spreadsheets. Detailed, color-coded, horrifyingly thorough spreadsheets. The first was titled Chen Family Assets, Current. My assets, listed with disturbing accuracy. House, Maple Heights. Market value, $680,000. Mortgage, $0. Equity, $680,000. Richard Chen, pension, $2,400 per month until death. Investment account, Fidelity, $147,000 as of April 15, 2022. Checking/savings, approximately $23,000, variable. Social Security, $1,850 per month. Total liquid assets, approximately $170,000. Total net worth, including house, approximately $850,000. She knew everything. Every account, every balance, every source of income. The second spreadsheet was titled Projected Timeline. Year 1 to 3. Maintain relationship. Continue financial extraction at current rate approximately $35,000 per year. Build emotional dependency. Year 3 to 5. Introduce health concerns. Suggest adding Derek to house deed for safety. Establish pattern of Margaret's declining capability. Year 5 to 7. If natural death hasn't occurred, explore assisted living options. Sell house, liquidate assets. Year 7 plus, full inheritance. Estimated total, $600,000 to $800,000, depending on market conditions and Margaret's spending rate. I sat down heavily in the office chair, the spreadsheets trembling in my hands. This wasn't careless cruelty. This wasn't thoughtless comments made in a moment of frustration. This was a plan, a calculated, methodical plan to extract everything I had and then dispose of me. And according to the timeline, they were right on schedule. Victoria returned at 2:47 p.m., smelling of lavender and eucalyptus, her skin glowing from whatever treatments $300 could buy. How was she? Victoria asked, already scrolling through her phone. Perfect, I said. She's an angel, isn't she? Victoria smiled without looking up. Oh, by the way, Derek and I were talking. Emma's birthday is coming up in September, and we were thinking of doing something special. A princess party, maybe. Professional entertainment, a bounce house, the whole thing. That sounds lovely. We found a party planner who does amazing work. The package we like is $4,500, but it includes everything: decorations, cake, photographer. Derek thought maybe you'd want to contribute, since you couldn't give her much for Christmas. Couldn't give her much. I'd given Emma a $500 savings bond for Christmas. Victoria had deemed it not really a gift, because it wasn't something Emma could play with immediately. I'll think about it, I said. Victoria finally looked up from her phone, a slight frown creasing her forehead. Think about it. Margaret, it's for Emma, your granddaughter. I thought you'd be excited to help. 3 years ago, I would have apologized, would have immediately agreed, would have found a way to make it work, even if it meant skipping meals or turning off my heat. But 3 years ago, I hadn't known I was just a line item in someone's financial plan. I said I'll think about it. I picked up my purse, avoiding Victoria's surprised gaze. I need to go. Give Emma a kiss from me when she wakes up. I was out the door before Victoria could respond, my hands shaking as I fumbled with my car keys. The drive home took 7 minutes. I don't remember any of it. What I remember is walking into my house, the house Victoria wanted to sell, the house she was waiting to inherit, the house Richard and I had filled with love, and closing the door behind me. Then I sat down at my kitchen table, put my head in my hands, and wept. I cried for the money I'd given them, for the years I'd wasted trying to earn love that was never real, for the daughter-in-law who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between her and a bigger house. I cried for Richard, who would have seen through Victoria's act years ago, who would have protected me from my own desperate need to be loved. And I cried for myself, for the woman I'd let myself become, the doormat, the ATM, the old burden just waiting to die. The tears ran out eventually. They always do. I made myself tea, Richard's favorite, the oolong we used to drink together every evening, and sat on the back porch as the sun set over our garden. 32 years. This house had seen 32 years of our life together. Derek's childhood, Richard's illness, my grief, and Victoria wanted to sell it. I thought about the spreadsheet, the timeline, the cold, clinical way she'd mapped out my remaining years. Year 5 to 7, if natural death hasn't occurred, explore assisted living options. She was planning to put me in a home, to warehouse me somewhere while she sold off everything Richard and I had built, to explain to Emma that Nai was happier in a place with professional care. The anger came slowly at first, then all at once. Not the hot, explosive anger I'd felt listening to her phone call. This was something different, something colder, something that settled into my bones and made everything suddenly, crystallinely clear. I was 67 years old, in good health, according to my last checkup. My mother had lived to 91, my grandmother to 88. Victoria might be waiting another 20 years for her inheritance, but only if I let her. Only if I continued playing the role she'd assigned me. The grateful old woman, the compliant mother-in-law, the endless source of money and free labor. What if I didn't? What if, instead of waiting to die, I started living? I set down my tea and walked inside to my office. The filing cabinet Victoria had helped me organize sat in the corner, a monument to my own naivety. I opened the drawer where I kept my financial documents and began to read. Really read. For the first time in years, Richard had left me more than I remembered. The pension, the investments, the house, small insurance policies I'd forgotten about. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough to live comfortably if I stopped hemorrhaging money to people who despise me. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Still thinking about Emma's birthday party. LMK soon. Need to book the planner. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back. No. 3 seconds later, my phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen. I turned off the phone and went back to my documents. Tomorrow, I would visit my lawyer. The one who'd handled Richard's estate, who'd known us for decades, who'd warned me 3 years ago that I was giving away too much too fast. Tomorrow, I would start fighting back. But tonight, I poured myself a glass of Richard's good whiskey, raised it to his photo on the mantel, and made a promise. "They're not getting this house," I said to the empty room. "They're not getting anything else. And they're sure as hell not getting rid of me." For the first time in 3 years, I smiled. Harold Winters had been Richard's attorney for 26 years. He'd handled our wills, our estate planning, the legal paperwork when Richard started his small accounting firm. He'd been at our wedding anniversary parties, at Derek's high school graduation, at Richard's funeral. When I called his office at 8:15 a.m. on Wednesday, his secretary put me through immediately. "Margaret." Harold's voice was warm with genuine concern. "I've been meaning to call you. How are you holding up? I need to see you today, Harold. It's urgent." A pause. I could picture him in his cluttered office, surrounded by law books and family photos, his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead the way they always were. "I have a cancellation at 2 p.m. Can you make it then?" "I'll be there." The drive to downtown Seattle took 45 minutes in midday traffic. I used the time to organize my thoughts, to rehearse what I would say, to steel myself against the shame of admitting how badly I'd let things go. Harold's office was on the 14th floor of a building overlooking Puget Sound. I'd been here dozens of times over the years, but today it felt different. Today I wasn't Richard's wife, handling routine legal matters. Today I was a woman fighting for her survival. "Margaret." Harold stood when I entered, coming around his desk to embrace me. He'd aged since Richard's funeral. More gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but his grip was still strong. "Sit down. Tell me what's happening." I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, the same chair where I'd signed my will 15 years ago, where I'd wept while Richard signed his power of attorney during his illness. "I need to know," I said slowly. "What would happen if I died tomorrow? Legally, financially, everything." Harold's eyebrows rose. "Is there something wrong? Are you ill?" "No, but I need to understand exactly what I'm worth. And exactly who gets what when I'm gone." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded and pulled a thick folder from his filing cabinet. "Your current will, executed in 2018, leaves everything to Derek as sole beneficiary. The house, your investments, your personal property. Standard arrangement for a widow with 1 child. And if Derek is married when I die, then his wife would have certain spousal rights to whatever he inherits. Community property laws in Washington are complex, but essentially, anything he inherits becomes marital property if he commingles it with shared assets." I closed my eyes. "So, if I die tomorrow, Victoria gets half of everything." "Effectively, yes. Maybe more, depending on how Derek manages the inheritance." The spreadsheet flashed through my mind. Total net worth, approximately $850,000. Half of that was $425,000. More than enough to motivate someone to wait out an old woman's death. "I want to change my will." Harold set down his pen. "Margaret, before we do anything, I think you should tell me what's really going on." So I told him. Everything. The $187,000 I'd given them since the wedding. The down payment, the renovations, the monthly emergencies that somehow never stopped emerging. The gradual exclusion from family gatherings. The Christmas I'd spent alone. And then I told him about the phone call, the spreadsheet, the 5-year timeline to extract my assets and ship me off to assisted living. Harold listened without interrupting, his face growing stonier with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Do you have copies of these documents?" "The spreadsheet." I shook my head. I didn't think to photograph them. I was in shock. "That's understandable." He made a note on his legal pad. "Margaret, I have to be honest with you. What you've described, the financial extraction, the manipulation, it's unfortunately common. Elder financial abuse is one of the fastest growing crimes in America. Elder financial abuse." The words hit me like a slap. I gave them money willingly. They didn't steal it. Did they tell you the truth about why they needed it? Did they disclose their actual financial situation? Did they inform you that they were tracking your assets and planning to institutionalize you? No. Then it wasn't truly willing, Margaret. Consent obtained through manipulation isn't real consent. I sat with that for a moment. The guilt I'd been carrying, the sense that I'd brought this on myself through weakness and naivety, began to shift into something else. "What can I do?" Harold leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "First, we change your will. Today, I can have new documents drawn up within the hour." "Change it to what?" That's up to you. You could leave everything to charity. You could establish a trust with conditions for inheritance. You could leave specific bequests to Derek while protecting the bulk of your estate from Victoria's influence. And Derek would contest it. He could try. But if we document your reasoning, your concerns about financial exploitation, your desire to protect your assets from someone who has demonstrated predatory behavior, any challenge would be difficult to sustain. I thought about my son, the boy I'd raised in that house, the man who'd stood silently while his wife called me a burden, who'd allowed himself to be turned against me inch by inch over years. Did I want to punish him? Or did I want to protect myself? What else can I do? I asked. Besides the will? Harold smiled grimly. Quite a lot, actually. The next 2 hours were in education. I learned that I could revoke the financial gifts I'd made, not legally recover them, but stop any future obligations. No more automatic transfers. No more emergency bailouts. No more birthday party contributions. I learned that I could protect my house by transferring it into a living trust with myself as sole beneficiary and trustee. This would make it nearly impossible for Victoria to pressure Derek into adding his name to the deed. I learned that I could establish a formal caregiving arrangement with designated decision-makers, people who were not Derek or Victoria, to prevent them from having me declared incompetent and shipped to a facility against my will. You're describing building a fortress, I said when Harold finished outlining the options. That's exactly what I'm describing. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Margaret, I've known you and Richard for decades. I watched you raise Derek, and I have to tell you, what you described sounds like a systematic campaign to isolate you, extract your resources, and position for maximum inheritance. You think Victoria planned this from the beginning? I think Victoria recognized an opportunity and exploited it. Whether it was conscious from day one or developed over time. He shrugged. Does it matter? It didn't. Not really. There's something else you should know, Harold continued. Something I probably should have told you years ago. My stomach tightened. What? He hesitated, then pulled another folder from his cabinet. When Richard was ill, he came to see me, alone. He was worried about you, about what would happen after he was gone. He never mentioned that. He didn't want to burden you with his fears while you were caring for him. Harold opened the folder and slid a document across the desk. He asked me to draft this. He never signed it. He died before he could decide. But I kept it in case it ever became relevant. I looked at the paper. The heading read, Amendment to Last Will and Testament of Richard Chen. Below it, in Richard's familiar handwriting, was a note. For Harold, I'm worried about Victoria. Something about her feels wrong. If anything happens to me, please watch over Maggie. Make sure Derek doesn't let that woman destroy everything we built. R. My eyes blurred with tears. He knew, I whispered. He saw it before I did. Richard was perceptive about people. It's what made him such a good accountant. He could see through the numbers to the reality underneath. Harold's voice was gentle. He wanted to add provisions to his will that would have protected his assets from being accessed by anyone other than you and Derek directly. He was particularly concerned about limiting spousal access. Why didn't he tell me? He didn't want to damage your relationship with Victoria when he might be wrong. And frankly, Margaret, you were so happy that Derek had found someone. Richard didn't want to take that away from you, especially when he knew he wouldn't be around to help pick up the pieces, if he was right. I held the paper in my trembling hands, Richard's handwriting swimming before my eyes. Please watch over Maggie. He'd tried to protect me, even from beyond the grave. And I'd walked right into the trap he'd seen coming. Can I keep this? I asked. Of course. It's not a legal document. He never signed it. But I thought you should know that your instincts now match what Richard sensed 3 years ago. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it into my purse. A message from my husband, reaching across death to validate what I'd finally begun to understand. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't an ungrateful mother-in-law making problems where none existed. I was a target, and I had been from the beginning. We worked until 5:30 p.m. By the time I left Harold's office, I had a new will, leaving my estate to a charitable trust with Derek as a contingent beneficiary, only if he could demonstrate 5 years of financial independence and no contact with Victoria. A living trust holding my house, with my sister Rosa named as successor trustee if I became incapacitated. A durable power of attorney designating Rosa and Harold as my agents, explicitly excluding Derek and anyone connected to him by marriage. An advance healthcare directive specifying that under no circumstances was I to be placed in a long-term care facility without the written consent of Rosa and an independent physician of her choosing. And documentation of everything I'd given Derek and Victoria over the past 3 years, with Harold's professional assessment that the pattern suggested financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. What happens now? I asked as Harold walked me to the elevator. Now you wait, and you watch, and you start saying no. They're going to be angry. They're going to be furious, Harold corrected. They've spent 3 years training you to comply, and you're about to stop complying. Expect manipulation, guilt trips, possibly threats. They may try to convince Derek that you've lost your mind. That's a common tactic when elderly relatives start protecting themselves. And if they do, he handed me a business card. This is Dr. Patricia Okonkwo. She's a geriatric psychiatrist who specializes in competency evaluations. If anyone, Derek, Victoria, anyone, suggests that you're not mentally capable of making your own decisions, you call her immediately. She'll document that you're perfectly lucid and acting in your rational self-interest. I tucked the card into my wallet next to the folded note from Richard. 2 pieces of paper. 2 forms of protection from a husband who'd love me and a lawyer who'd watched out for me when I couldn't watch out for myself. Thank you, Harold, for everything. He squeezed my hand. Richard would be proud of you, Margaret. It takes courage to see the truth about people we love, and it takes even more courage to act on it. The drive home took over an hour in rush hour traffic. I didn't mind. I needed the time to think. My phone had accumulated 17 missed calls while I'd been in Harold's office. 12 from Victoria, 4 from Derek, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. The voicemails told a story. Victoria, 10:15 a.m. Margaret, we need to talk about what happened yesterday. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Victoria, 11:47 a.m. You can't just say no and then ignore me. That's incredibly childish. Derek, 12:30 p.m. Mom, what's going on? Victoria said you hung up on her. Can you call me back? Victoria, 1:15 p.m. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's not funny. Emma's been asking for you all morning. Derek, 2:45 p.m. Mom, seriously, I'm getting worried. Are you okay? Victoria said you were acting strange yesterday. Victoria, 3:30 p.m. Fine. If you want to be petty about a birthday party, that's your choice. But don't think there won't be consequences. Victoria, 4:47 p.m. Derek's furious with you, just so you know. We both are. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. By throwing a tantrum like a child. I listened to each message with a strange sense of detachment. Like I was observing someone else's life, someone else's drama. After everything we've done for you, the audacity was breathtaking. I'd given them nearly $200,000, watched their child for free, rearranged my entire life around their needs, and Victoria genuinely believed I owed them more. Or maybe she didn't believe it. Maybe it was just another manipulation tactic, another way to keep me off balance and compliant. It didn't matter anymore. I deleted all the voicemails and drove the rest of the way in silence. My house looked different when I pulled into the driveway. Not physically different. The same maple trees Richard had planted, the same porch swing, the same cracked concrete I kept meaning to fix, but it felt different. It felt like mine. For the first time in 3 years, I walked through my front door without the weight of obligation pressing down on my shoulders. No one was expecting me to babysit tomorrow. No one was counting on my money to fund their lifestyle. No one was calculating how much longer I would live. I made myself dinner. Real dinner, not the toast and tea I'd been surviving on while sending my grocery money to people who despised me. Salmon and roasted vegetables, a glass of good wine, chocolate for dessert. Then I sat on my back porch and watched the stars come out. My phone buzzed again. Derek this time. Mom, we need to talk. Can I come over tomorrow? I thought about ignoring it, about making him wait, the way Victoria had made me wait for scraps of attention. But Derek was still my son. Still the baby I'd held in this house, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd loved even when he'd failed to love me back. Maybe there was something left to salvage. Maybe, away from Victoria's influence, he could remember who he used to be. Come at 10, I typed back. I'll make coffee. Tomorrow, I would start learning the truth about my son, whether he was a victim of Victoria's manipulation or a willing participant in her schemes. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. But tonight, I allowed myself one small moment of peace. One evening in the house my husband had built me, surrounded by memories of better times, protected by the legal fortress I'd started constructing. One evening of being Margaret Chen, not an old burden waiting to die, but a woman who had finally decided to live. Derek arrived at 10:07 a.m. I watched him pull into the driveway from my kitchen window, noting the tension in his shoulders as he sat in his car for a full minute before getting out. He was wearing the blue sweater I'd given him last Christmas, the one Victoria had called too casual for his professional image. I wondered if he'd chosen it deliberately, or if it was just what was clean. He looked older than his 31 years. Tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying weight you can't set down. For a moment, watching him walk up the path where he'd learned to ride a bicycle, I felt my resolve waver. This was my son, my baby, the center of my universe for 3 decades. Then I remembered the spreadsheet, the timeline, the way he'd stood silent while Victoria banned me from Christmas dinner. Love doesn't mean blindness. Not anymore. I opened the door before he could knock. Mom. Derek's voice cracked on the single syllable. Can I come in? I stepped aside without answering. He walked past me into the living room, his eyes scanning the familiar space like he was seeing it for the first time. The photos on the mantel, the couch where he'd watched Saturday morning cartoons, the window seat where Richard used to read him bedtime stories. Coffee? I asked. Please. I took my time in the kitchen, letting him sit with the silence. The old Margaret would have rushed to fill it, would have chattered nervously about the weather, or the garden, or Emma's latest milestone. The new Margaret understood the power of making people uncomfortable. When I returned with 2 mugs, Derek was holding the framed photo of Richard and me on our wedding day. His hands were trembling slightly. I miss him, he said without looking up. I miss who I was when he was alive. I set down the coffee and took my seat across from him. What do you mean? I mean, he put down the photo and finally met my eyes. I think I've become someone Dad wouldn't recognize. Someone you probably don't recognize either. You're right. I don't. The words landed hard. I saw him flinch, saw the flash of something, guilt, shame, cross his features before he composed himself. Mom, I know things have been difficult. I know Victoria can be intense. But you have to understand the pressure we're under. The mortgage, Emma's expenses, keeping up with our neighborhood. Derek. I held up my hand. Before you continue, I need you to answer some questions. Honest. Can you do that? He nodded slowly. Did you know Victoria was tracking my finances? The color drained from his face. What? My investments. My pension. The value of this house. Did you know she had spreadsheets detailing exactly what I'm worth? Mom, that's. He ran his hand through his hair. A nervous habit he'd had since childhood. Victoria handles our financial planning. She's good with numbers. I'm sure if she was looking at your situation, it was just because she cares about. She has a timeline, Derek. A 5 to 7 year timeline for when I'll die or be put in a nursing home, and how much you'll inherit when it happens. Silence. I watched my son's face cycle through emotions. Confusion, disbelief, the slow dawning of recognition. You knew, I said quietly. Maybe not the details, but you knew something. I didn't. Mom, I swear I didn't know about any timeline. His voice was desperate. But God, I'm such a coward. Tell me. He set down his coffee with shaking hands. Victoria talks about money a lot. About our future. About how we need to think long-term. About building generational wealth for Emma. And sometimes she'd say things like, when your mother's estate settles, or, once we have the inheritance. And you didn't think that was strange. Talking about my death like it was a line item in your budget. I told myself she was just being practical. She's always been practical. She grew up poor, Mom. Really poor. Her dad left when she was 7, and her mom worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. So I thought she was just scared of being poor again. Of ending up like her mother. I absorbed this information, filing it away. Victoria's background, her fear, her hunger, her determination never to be vulnerable again. It explained some things. It didn't excuse them. What else did she say about me? Derek was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, His voice was barely above a whisper. "She said you were naive, that you'd give us anything if we asked the right way. She called it managing the asset. Managing the asset. Like I was a rental property to be maintained until it could be sold. And the Christmas dinner, banning me because I wasn't good enough for her parents. That was Victoria's idea, but I agreed to it. He couldn't meet my eyes. Her parents are, they're snobs, Mom. They look down on anyone who isn't from their world. I thought if I could just keep you separate, keep the peace, it would be easier. Easier for whom? For everyone. For me." He finally looked up, and I saw tears running down his cheeks. "I was a coward, Mom. I chose the path of least resistance because standing up to Victoria felt impossible. Because every time I tried, she'd twist things around until I couldn't remember what I was arguing about. And you were always so willing to help, so eager to make things work. I told myself you were fine, that the money didn't matter to you, that you were happy just to be involved in our lives. I gave you $187,000, Derek. That's everything your father and I saved. Everything he left me to live on." The number hit him like a physical blow. I watched him do the math in his head, watched the horror spread across his features. That much. I knew about some of it, but $187,000. The down payment, the wedding, the renovations, the car repairs and medical bills, and grocery shortfalls, and birthday parties, and Christmas presents, and everything else Victoria said you needed. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. "Did you really not know? I knew about the big things, the down payment, the wedding, but Victoria handled the rest. She'd say she'd talk to you, that you'd offered, that you wanted to help. I never asked questions because..." He stopped, swallowing hard. "Because it was convenient not to." Yes. The admission came out strangled. Because it was convenient. We sat in silence. Outside, I could hear birds singing, the distant sound of a lawnmower, the normal sounds of a normal Thursday in a neighborhood that didn't know anything was wrong. "What do you want from me, Derek? Why are you really here?" He looked up, confusion in his eyes. "What do you mean? Victoria sent you 17 messages yesterday after I said no to the birthday party. You called me 4 times, and now you're here, crying on my couch about what a coward you've been." I leaned forward. "So I'm asking, what do you want? More money? For me to apologize? To go back to being the grateful grandmother who doesn't make trouble?" "No, Mom. I came because I was worried about you. Worried about me. Or worried that I'm finally standing up for myself." The question hung in the air between us. Derek was quiet for a long time. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "I need to show you something," he said. "Something I found last night." He pulled up an email thread and handed me the phone. "Read it." The emails were between Victoria and her mother, Patricia. Dated over the past 6 months. March 12th. "Patricia, how's Project Margaret going?" Victoria, "On track. She's completely dependent now. Derek doesn't question anything I tell him about the money." March 28th. "Patricia, have you looked into the conservatorship paperwork?" Victoria, "Not yet. Too early. Need to establish a pattern of concerning behavior first. I've been telling the neighbors she's getting forgetful." April 15th. "Patricia, what about the house deed? Any progress?" Victoria, "Working on it. I'm going to suggest she add Derek to the title, for safety. She'll do it if she thinks it's protecting him." May 3rd. "Patricia, the assisted living place in Tacoma has an opening. Should I put her name on the waiting list?" Victoria, "Yes. Better to have options. Derek's too soft to make hard decisions, so I'll need to manage it when the time comes." May 10th. "Patricia, she's lasting longer than expected. Your father's mother was the same way, stubborn." Victoria, "I know. But we're patient. The house alone is worth $680,000, plus her investments. It'll be worth the wait." I read the emails twice. 3 times. Each word was a blade, sliding between my ribs. "When did you find this?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Last night." Victoria left her laptop open when she went to check on Emma. I wasn't snooping, the screen was right there, and I saw my mother's name. "And you read it all?" "I read enough." His voice broke. "Mom, I had no idea. I swear to God, I had no idea it was this bad." The conservatorship, the assisted living, telling neighbors you're forgetful, I didn't know any of this. I handed back the phone. My hands were steady, but inside I was screaming. They were planning to have me declared incompetent, to take control of my finances, my home, my life, to warehouse me in some facility in Tacoma while they sold off everything Richard and I had built. And Victoria's mother was in on it. The woman I'd smiled at during holidays, who I'd welcomed into my home, who I'd assumed was just a harmless snob, she was the architect of my destruction. What are you going to do? I asked Derek. I don't know. He dropped his head into his hands. I can't stay with someone who would do this. But there's Emma to think about. And Victoria will fight me for custody. She'll use everything against me. My income, my work hours, everything. That's not what I asked. I waited until he looked up. I asked what you're going to do. Not about Victoria. About me. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Mom, I'm on your side. I should have been on your side from the beginning. But I'm here now. Whatever you need, whatever you want to do, I'll support you. Words are easy, Derek. You've made a lot of promises over the years. Promises that always seemed to get forgotten when Victoria decided they were inconvenient. I know I haven't earned your trust. He stood up, pacing the living room like a caged animal, but this is different. This isn't about money or Christmas dinner. This is about my mother being treated like an asset to be liquidated. He stopped in front of Richard's photo. Dad would be so ashamed of me, he said quietly. He tried to warn me, right before he died. He said, watch out for Victoria. She sees the world differently than we do. I thought he was just being paranoid. Sick people get paranoid sometimes, right? But he knew. He saw what she was. I thought of the note Harold had shown me. Richard's handwritten warning, tucked in a file for 3 years, waiting for me to be ready to hear it. Your father saw a lot of things, I said. He saw them earlier than I did. Derek turned to face me. What do you need me to do, Mom? Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. I considered him for a long moment. The boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, the stranger he'd been for the past 3 years. Could I trust him? Did I have a choice? I need you to keep acting normal, I said finally. Don't let Victoria know you've seen those emails. Don't let her know you've talked to me about any of this. You want me to pretend everything's fine. I want you to buy me time. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Richard and I had planted together. I've started protecting myself legally. New will, trust documents, power of attorney. But if Victoria finds out I'm fighting back before I'm ready, she'll accelerate whatever she's planning. I need a few more weeks. Weeks to do what? I turned to face him, to make sure that when this all falls apart, I'm the one still standing. And Emma is protected. Emma. His face crumpled. God, Mom. She loves you so much. She asks about you constantly. Where's Nai? When is Nai coming? Victoria tells her you're busy, but Emma doesn't understand. My heart clenched. My granddaughter, caught in the middle of this mess, innocent of everything, loving me with the pure, uncomplicated love that only children possess. I'll see her again, I said. Soon. But first, I need to make sure no one can take her away from me, or use her against me. Derek nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do whatever you say. But Mom. He hesitated. Victoria is going to find out eventually. She always finds out. And when she does, I'll be ready. I walked him to the door, feeling the weight of everything that had passed between us. The confessions, the revelations, the fragile beginning of something that might be trust. Derek, I said as he stepped onto the porch. The emails. Did Victoria say anything about her father? He frowned. Her father? No. She never talks about him. He left when she was young, like I said. But Patricia mentioned him. About her mother-in-law being stubborn. Yeah, I noticed that. Why? I shook my head. Nothing. Probably nothing. But as I watched him drive away, a new thought was forming in my mind. Victoria had told me her father abandoned the family when she was 7. Left them with nothing. That's why she was so focused on financial security. But the email said, your father's mother. Present tense. As if Patricia's husband, Victoria's father, was still very much in the picture. Which meant Victoria had lied. And if she'd lied about that, what else had she lied about? I closed the door and walked back to my kitchen, where my laptop waited on the table. Time to do some research. I've never considered myself particularly skilled with computers. Richard handled all of that when he was alive. Setting up accounts, troubleshooting problems, navigating the labyrinth of the internet. After he died, I learned the basics out of necessity, but I still thought of technology as something other people understood. That Thursday afternoon, I discovered what desperation could teach you. Victoria had given me fragments of her history over the years. Small pieces offered during moments of seeming vulnerability, always perfectly timed to elicit sympathy or deflect criticism. Her father left when she was 7. Her mother worked 3 jobs. They'd been evicted twice before she turned 12. She put herself through college on scholarships and loans, graduating with honors despite having no family support. It was a compelling narrative, the kind of story that made you want to help her, to ensure she never experienced that kind of hardship again. It was also, I was beginning to suspect, a carefully constructed lie. I started with the basics. Victoria's maiden name was Hayes. Her mother was Patricia Hayes, née Morrison. Her father, according to Victoria, was a man named Thomas Hayes who'd abandoned them in 1998. But the email had mentioned your father's mother. Present tense, as if Thomas Hayes were still alive, still married to Patricia, still part of their family. I typed Thomas Hayes Seattle into Google and got 3 million results. Too broad. I tried Thomas Hayes Patricia Morrison, and the results narrowed to a few 100,000. Still too many. I thought about what I knew. Victoria had grown up in Spokane, not Seattle. She'd moved west after college, following a job opportunity. Thomas Hayes, Spokane, Washington, brought me to page after page of obituaries, business listings, social media profiles. None of them seemed right. Then I tried something different. Patricia Morrison Hayes, Spokane. The third result was a real estate listing from 2019. A house in Spokane's South Hill neighborhood, sold by Thomas and Patricia Hayes for $847,000. I clicked through to the listing. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a professionally landscaped yard. The photos showed gleaming hardwood floors, a chef's kitchen, art on the walls that looked expensive even to my untrained eye. This wasn't the home of a woman who'd worked 3 jobs to survive. This was the home of people with money, serious money. I kept digging. An old society page from the Spokane Spokesman Review, dated 2015. Thomas and Patricia Hayes of South Hill announced their annual contribution of $50,000 to the Spokane Symphony Endowment Fund. A press release from 2017. Hayes Financial Group celebrates 30 years of serving the Inland Northwest community. Founder Thomas Hayes credits his success to his wife Patricia's unwavering support. A Facebook post from a woman named Linda Morrison, tagged as Patricia Hayes' sister. Thanksgiving with my amazing sister and her family. So blessed to have such generous relatives. Family first. Grateful. The photo showed a large dining room, a table laden with food, and a family gathered around it. I zoomed in on the faces. There was Patricia, looking exactly as I remembered her from Emma's first birthday party. Elegant, composed, condescending. There was Thomas Hayes, a silver-haired man with Victoria's sharp cheekbones and calculating eyes. And there, seated between them, smiling at the camera like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, was my daughter-in-law. The timestamp said November 2016. 2 years before she met Derek. 2 years before she told me her father had abandoned the family when she was 7 years old. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through more photos. Victoria at Christmas with her parents. Victoria at her father's 60th birthday party. Victoria accepting a graduation gift. A new BMW, according to the caption. From the best parents a girl could ask for. She hadn't been abandoned. She hadn't grown up poor. She hadn't struggled through college on scholarships and loans. Victoria Hayes had grown up wealthy, privileged, and adored. Her father hadn't left. He built a financial empire that funded her every whim. Her mother hadn't worked 3 jobs. She'd chaired charity committees and hosted dinner parties for Spokane's elite. Every word Victoria had told me about her background was a lie. But why? Why invent a tragic backstory when the truth was so much more comfortable? I thought about the manipulation, the spreadsheets, the clinical ways she'd mapped out my remaining years. And suddenly, the answer was obvious. Sympathy. Trust. An excuse for her obsession with money that made her seem wounded rather than predatory. If Victoria admitted she came from wealth, her fixation on finances would look like greed. But if she claimed to have escaped poverty, that same fixation became understandable, admirable, even. The survival instinct of a woman who'd known hunger. I'd fallen for it completely. We all had. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Hayes Financial Group, Thomas's company, specialized in wealth management for high-net-worth clients. They had offices in Spokane, Seattle, and Portland, managing over $400 million in assets, according to their website. Thomas Hayes served on the boards of 3 local banks. Patricia Hayes was a founding member of the Spokane Arts Council and a major donor to multiple charities. They owned a vacation home in Coeur d'Alene and another in Scottsdale, Arizona. Victoria hadn't just grown up comfortable. She'd grown up rich. Private school rich. Country club rich. Trust fund rich. And she'd hidden all of it, constructing a false identity so convincing that even Derek believed it. I found the trust fund documentation by accident. A legal filing from 2012, part of a public court case involving Hayes Financial Group and a disgruntled former client. The case had been settled out of court, but the initial filings were still accessible through Washington State's judicial records system. Among the documents was a list of Hayes' family assets, disclosed as part of discovery. And there, on page 47, was a line item that made my blood run cold. Victoria and Hayes, irrevocable trust, $2,300,000. Established 1993. Distribution at age 25, 2018. Or upon marriage, whichever occurs first. $2.3 million. Victoria had a trust fund worth $2.3 million. She married Derek in March 2018, 2 months before her 25th birthday, which meant she received full access to that money before their first anniversary. I sat back in my chair, trying to process what I was seeing. Victoria had $2.3 million of her own money. She'd had it for over 4 years, and in that time, she'd extracted nearly $200,000 from me, a retired widow living on a pension and Social Security. Why? Why would someone with millions take thousands from an old woman who had so little? The answer came slowly, piecing itself together from fragments of memory. The way Victoria talked about money. The way she tracked every penny, even pennies that belonged to other people. The satisfaction in her voice when she convinced me to write another check. This wasn't about need. It had never been about need. It was about winning. Victoria didn't take my money because she required it. She took it because she could. Because manipulating people out of their resources made her feel powerful. Because every dollar extracted from a foolish old woman was proof of her superiority. I was a game to her, a challenge. How much could she take before I noticed? How far could she push before I pushed back? And I'd made it so easy, so pathetically, tragically easy. My phone rang at 4:30 p.m. Derek's number. Mom. His voice was tense, hushed. Can you talk? I'm here. I found more emails. Victoria uses a different account for the stuff with her mom. I didn't know about it until today. She left her phone in the bathroom while she was showering, and What did you find? A long pause. It's bad, Mom. Really bad. Tell me. She's been talking to a lawyer, someone in Tacoma, about the conservatorship process, how long it takes, what evidence you need, how to get a family member declared incompetent. His voice cracked. She asked about expedited timelines. If there was a way to speed things up. My stomach clenched. When were these emails? The most recent one was 3 days ago, the day after you said no about Emma's birthday party. 3 days ago. While I'd been crying in my kitchen, Victoria had been researching how to have me declared legally incompetent. There's something else, Derek continued. Something about her father. I know about her father. You do? I spent the afternoon researching. Thomas Hayes, Hayes Financial Group, the house on South Hill, all of it. Silence. Then, you know about the trust fund. $2.3 million. Released when she married you. Derek exhaled sharply. She told me she had a small inheritance from her grandmother. $50,000. That's all. She said we needed to be careful with money, because that was our only cushion. Did you ever see bank statements? Financial records? Victoria handles all of that. I trusted her. The same way I had trusted her. The same way everyone trusted her, because she was so convincing, so sympathetic, so skilled at making you feel like questioning her would be cruel. Derek, listen to me carefully. I need you to get documentation. Bank statements, tax returns, anything that shows what Victoria actually has. Can you access those? I think so. We have a shared filing system on her computer, but I've never really looked through it. Look through it tonight. Copy everything you can find. And Derek? Yeah? Be careful. If Victoria suspects you're working against her, she'll move faster. She's already researching conservatorships. She's already preparing to take control. We need to stay ahead of her. I understand. A pause. Mom, I'm sorry. For everything. For not seeing what she was. For letting her do this to you. Apologies can wait. Right now, I need action. You'll get it, I promise. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my living room, the laptop screen still glowing with evidence of Victoria's deception. $2.3 million in a trust fund, $200,000 extracted from a widow with nothing, a conservatorship lawyer on retainer. A plan to have me declared incompetent and shipped to a facility in Tacoma. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was something pathological. A compulsion to take, to control, to dominate. Not because she needed what she was taking, but because the taking itself was the point. And she'd chosen me as her target. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed Richard and I had shared for 30 years, staring at the ceiling, running through everything I'd learned. Victoria was rich. She'd always been rich. Her tragic backstory was a fabrication designed to manipulate people into sympathy. She was planning to have me declared incompetent, to take control of my finances, my home, my life, to put me in a facility where I couldn't interfere with her plans. Her mother was complicit. Patricia Hayes, née Morrison, wasn't a former struggling single mother. She was a wealthy socialite who'd raised her daughter to see other people as resources to be exploited. And Derek had been fooled like the rest of us. Or had he? I wanted to believe my son was innocent, that he'd been manipulated by a master manipulator, that the man crying on my couch was genuine. But a small, paranoid voice in the back of my mind kept asking questions. Derek had access to the family finances. He knew about the large gifts. He'd stood by for 3 years while Victoria extracted my savings. Was he a victim? Or was he playing a longer game than I realized? I turned onto my side, looking at Richard's photo on the nightstand. What do I do? I whispered to the empty room. How do I know who to trust? The photo didn't answer. Richard had been gone for 3 years, and he wasn't coming back to save me. I had to save myself. At 3 a.m., I got out of bed and went to my desk. There was one more thing I needed to check. One more thread to pull. Victoria had been married before. She'd mentioned it once, early in her relationship with Derek. A brief marriage in her early 20s, ended quickly, no hard feelings. A youthful mistake. I'd never thought to ask about it. Never wondered about the man she'd married before my son. Now, I needed to know everything. I typed Victoria Hayes married Spokane into the search bar. The first result was a wedding announcement from the Spokane Spokesman Review, dated June 2013. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Hayes of South Hill are pleased to announce the marriage of their daughter, Victoria Ann, to Mr. James Whitfield III of Portland, Oregon. The ceremony was held at St. Augustine's Cathedral. James Whitfield III of Portland. The name sounded familiar. I searched again. James Whitfield III was the son of James Whitfield Jr., who was the founder of Whitfield Properties, one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the Pacific Northwest. Victoria's first husband had been even richer than her parents. I found the divorce filing from 2015. It was brief, citing irreconcilable differences. No children, no public disputes. The settlement terms were sealed. But the timing was interesting. Victoria married James in 2013. She divorced him in 2015. She met Derek in early 2018. She married Derek in March 2018. 3 years between marriages. Just long enough to establish herself in a new city, build a new identity, find a new target, a pattern. I searched for James Whitfield III's current whereabouts and found a LinkedIn profile listing him as President of Whitfield Properties, Portland Division. His profile photo showed a man in his mid-30s, handsome in a generic way, with tired eyes and a forced smile. On a whim, I clicked through to his connections. 847 people. I scrolled through them randomly, not sure what I was looking for. Then I stopped. One of James Whitfield's connections was a woman named Sandra Chen. My heart hammered. Chen was a common name. It could be a coincidence. I clicked on Sandra's profile. Sandra Chen, retired, formerly office manager at Chen Accounting Services. Chen Accounting Services, Richard's company. The firm he'd built from nothing. The one he'd run until his illness forced him to sell. Sandra Chen had worked for Richard for 12 years. She'd attended our wedding anniversary parties, sent flowers when he died, called me every few months to check in. And she was connected on LinkedIn to Victoria's ex-husband. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It could be nothing. Sandra knew lots of people. Richard's company had worked with businesses throughout the Pacific Northwest. Maybe she'd done James Whitfield's taxes at some point. But the coincidence felt too large, too convenient. I pulled out my phone and composed a text to Sandra. Hi Sandra, it's Margaret Chen. I hope you're well. I was wondering if you might have time to meet for coffee this week. There's something I'd like to ask you about. I sent the message and watched the screen until it showed delivered. Then I went back to bed, though I knew sleep wouldn't come. The web of connections was growing larger. Victoria, Patricia, Thomas, James Whitfield, Sandra Chen. Somehow, they were all linked. And I was beginning to suspect that Victoria's appearance in Derek's life, in my life, wasn't random at all. She hadn't found us by accident. She'd been hunting. Sandra Chen called me back at 7:15 the next morning. Margaret, what a lovely surprise. Her voice was warm, unchanged from all the years she'd worked alongside Richard. I've been meaning to reach out. How are you doing? I'm well, Sandra. Thank you for asking. I gripped my coffee mug tighter. I was wondering if you might be free for lunch today. There's something I need to discuss with you. Something important. A pause. I could hear her breathing, measuring her response. Of course. I'm free afternoon. Would you like to come to my place? I'm in Bellevue now, near the Botanical Garden. I'll be there at 12:30. Sandra lived in a modest townhouse on a quiet street lined with cherry trees. I'd been to her old apartment once, years ago, for a retirement party Richard had insisted on throwing. That had been a cramped studio in a complex that smelled of mildew and loneliness. This was different, nicer. The kind of upgrade that suggested someone's circumstances had improved dramatically. She met me at the door, older than I remembered, but still elegant. Silver hair cropped short, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, a cashmere sweater in soft blue. Margaret. She embraced me warmly. You look wonderful. Richard would be so proud of how you're holding up. The mention of Richard's name sent a pang through my chest. Thank you, Sandra. You look well yourself. Retirement agrees with me. She ushered me inside. Come, I've made lunch. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and soup, but I thought we could talk while we eat. Her living room was comfortable and well furnished. I noticed details as she led me to the kitchen. New appliances, quality artwork, a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. Everything spoke of money. More money than a retired office manager should have. Your home is lovely, I said carefully. Thank you. I was lucky with some investments. She set bowls of tomato soup on the table, followed by a plate of neatly arranged sandwiches. Now, what did you want to ask me about? You sounded concerned on the phone. I'd spent the drive over rehearsing this conversation, trying to find the right approach. Now, sitting across from this woman who'd known Richard for decades, I decided to be direct. I need to ask you about James Whitfield III. Sandra's hand froze halfway to her soup spoon. Her face remained composed, but I saw something flash in her eyes. Recognition and fear. James Whitfield, she repeated slowly. Why would you ask about him? Because I noticed you're connected to him on LinkedIn, and because he used to be married to my daughter-in-law. The color drained from Sandra's face. She set down her spoon carefully, precisely, the way someone does when they're trying to maintain control. I see. Her voice had changed, quieter now, cautious. I wondered if you'd ever find out. Find out what, Sandra? She was silent for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to the window, her back to me. Richard was a good man, she said. One of the best I ever worked for. He treated me like family, not like an employee. When I retired, I thought that would be the end of our connection. But then, she stopped. Then I was approached. By whom? A woman named Patricia Hayes. She said she was a potential investor looking for information about successful small businesses in the Seattle area. She wanted to know about companies with good leadership, solid finances, family ownership structures. My heart began to pound. When was this? Spring 2017. About a year before Derek met Victoria. A year before. Not a coincidence, not even close. What did you tell her? Sandra turned to face me, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. I told her about Chen Accounting Services, about Richard's reputation, his client base, his approach to business. I mentioned that he was ill, that Derek would likely inherit everything. She swallowed hard. I didn't know what she was planning. I swear to you, Margaret, I thought she was just a businesswoman doing research. But that's not all, is it? No. Sandra sat back down, her hands trembling. A few months later, she contacted me again, asked more specific questions. About Derek, his personality, his relationship history, what kind of woman he'd be attracted to. About Richard's health, his prognosis, his estate plan. And you answered her questions. She paid me. The words came out barely above a whisper. $20,000, deposited into an offshore account she helped me set up. For information. Just information, she said. No one would get hurt. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Sandra, Richard's trusted employee, the woman who'd sent flowers to his funeral, had sold information about our family to the people who were now trying to destroy me. The LinkedIn connection with James Whitfield, I said. How does he fit in? He's Patricia's nephew, her sister's son. Sandra wiped her eyes with a napkin. The Whitfield family and the Hayes family have been connected for decades. Business partnerships, social circles, all of it. When Victoria married James, it was practically an arranged marriage. Two wealthy families merging their interests. But they divorced. Because Victoria was too much, even for James. He caught her going through his family's financial records, mapping out their assets the way she's probably mapped out yours. The Whitfields are powerful people, Margaret. They don't take kindly to being manipulated. They paid Victoria a settlement to go away quietly and sign an NDA. I processed this information, fitting it into what I already knew. Victoria had married James Whitfield, tried to run her schemes on a family as wealthy and connected as her own, and gotten caught. The Whitfields had paid her off and sent her packing. So she'd found a new target, a softer target, a family with money but without the resources or connections to fight back. Us. How did she find Derek specifically? Sandra looked away. I gave her his social media profiles, his schedule, the gym he worked out at, the coffee shop he went to every morning. She engineered a chance meeting at a conference mixer his company was hosting. Derek thought he'd found her randomly. He had no idea she'd been studying him for months. The manipulation was breathtaking. Victoria hadn't just stumbled into our lives. She'd been placed there deliberately, armed with detailed intelligence about our family, our finances, our vulnerabilities. And Sandra had handed her the keys. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Why admit to any of it? Because I've been watching from a distance. Sandra finally met my eyes. I've seen the announcements when Emma was born, the photos Victoria posts of their perfect life. And I've heard things. Rumors. What kind of rumors? That Victoria's first husband wasn't her only previous target. That there were others before James. An older man in Spokane. A widower with a successful business. He died of a heart attack 6 months after marrying her. The family contested the will, but Victoria had been named primary beneficiary just weeks before his death. My blood turned to ice. Are you saying she killed him? I'm saying nothing was ever proven, but the timing was convenient. Sandra reached across the table and took my hand. Margaret, I was greedy and stupid, and I helped set a trap that's been closing around you for years. I can't undo that, but I can tell you what I know, and I can warn you. Victoria Hayes is not just a gold digger. She's a predator, and if you don't stop her, you'll end up like that man in Spokane. Dead, with your estate emptied out before your body is cold. I drove home in a daze, Sandra's words echoing in my skull. She's a predator, you'll end up dead. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture more sinister than I'd imagined. Victoria had been hunting wealthy families for over a decade. Her first victim, the widower in Spokane, had died under mysterious circumstances. Her second target, James Whitfield, had been too well protected to exploit fully. So she'd pivoted, using her family's network to find softer targets. And Sandra, seduced by money and convinced she wasn't really doing anything wrong, had served up the Chen family on a silver platter. I thought about Victoria's spreadsheet, her timeline. Year 5 to 7. If natural death hasn't occurred. Natural death. The phrase took on a new, horrifying meaning. Was Victoria waiting for me to die naturally? Or was she preparing to help things along? I called Harold from my car, my hands shaking so badly I had to pull over. Margaret? What's wrong? I need to see you. Today. Right now, if possible. I have a client until 4. Can you come at 4:30? I'll be there. Harold's face grew graver with each revelation. Sandra's confession. The connection to James Whitfield. The mysterious death in Spokane. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. This changes everything, he said. I know. Margaret, if what Sandra told you is true, if Victoria has a pattern of targeting wealthy individuals, and there's an unexplained death in her past, this isn't just financial exploitation anymore. This could be criminal. Can we go to the police? Harold hesitated. With what evidence? A LinkedIn connection. The word of a woman who admits she was paid to spy on your family. The Spokane death was ruled natural causes. The Whitfield divorce is sealed under an NDA. He shook his head. Victoria is smart. She doesn't leave evidence lying around. So we do nothing. We wait for her to. I couldn't finish the sentence. No. Harold's voice hardened. We don't wait. We prepare. He pulled out a legal pad and began writing. First, we accelerate the protective measures we discussed. I want your house in that trust by end of business tomorrow. Power of attorney documents filed with the county. A letter to your physician documenting your current mental state, witnessed and notarized. What else? We need to investigate Victoria properly. Not just social media searches, real investigation. I know a private detective who specializes in this kind of thing. Former FBI. She's expensive, but thorough. How expensive? Her retainer is $15,000. But Margaret, if we're right about Victoria, this could save your life. I thought about my dwindling savings. The money I'd thrown away on people who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. Do it, I said. Harold nodded and made a note. I'll call her tonight. Her name is Diana Okoye. She's the best in the Northwest. How long will the investigation take? A few weeks, minimum. Diana will need to dig into Victoria's past, court records, financial history, interviews with people who knew her. If there's evidence of wrongdoing, she'll find it. A few weeks. It felt like an eternity. What do I do in the meantime? You act normal. You don't let Victoria know you're investigating her. And you document everything. He handed me a small voice recorder. Keep this with you. If Victoria says something threatening, if she makes any reference to your health or your assets, record it. I took the recorder, feeling its weight in my palm. Such a small thing. Such a dangerous game. Harold, there's one more thing I need to ask you. Anything. If something happens to me, if I have an accident, or a sudden illness, or anything that seems unexpected. I forced myself to meet his eyes. I want you to make sure there's an investigation. A real one. Don't let them write it off as natural causes. Harold's expression was grim. I've already drafted a letter to that effect. It's in my safe, along with copies of everything we've discussed. If anything happens to you, Margaret, I'll make sure the right people ask the right questions. Thank you. He walked me to the elevator, his hand on my shoulder. One more thing, he said as the doors opened. Your son, Derek, where does he stand in all this? I thought about Derek crying on my couch, swearing he hadn't known. About the emails he'd found, the information he'd promised to gather. I don't know yet, I admitted. I want to believe he's with me. But trust is earned. Harold nodded. Be careful with him, Margaret. Love can make us blind to things we don't want to see. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a notebook and pen, making lists. Things I knew for certain. Victoria had targeted our family deliberately. She had a history of exploiting wealthy individuals. At least one of her previous targets had died under suspicious circumstances. She was researching conservatorship options to take control of my assets. Her parents were actively involved in her schemes. Things I suspected but couldn't prove. Victoria's trust fund meant she didn't need my money, This was about control. The death in Spokane might not have been natural. Derek might be more complicit than he claimed. Things I needed to do. Complete legal protections, trust, POA, healthcare directive. Cooperate with Diana Okoye's investigation. Gather evidence from Derek without revealing my suspicions. Find out more about the Spokane death. Stay alive. The last item on the list made me laugh. A bitter sound in the empty kitchen. Stay alive. As if that were just another task to check off, like buying groceries or paying bills. But it wasn't a joke, not anymore. I looked at the wall calendar. May 20th. Harold had said the investigation would take a few weeks. The protective legal measures would be complete by tomorrow. I circled a date 3 weeks out. June 10th. By June 10th, I would have Diana's report. I would have all my legal protections in place. I would have Derek's financial documents, proving whether Victoria had hidden her wealth from him or whether he'd known all along. By June 10th, I would know everything I needed to know, and then I would act. I didn't know yet what that action would look like. Exposure? Legal action. Simply walking away and letting Victoria's schemes collapse under their own weight. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done being a victim. Victoria had spent years hunting me, planning, manipulating, waiting for the moment when she could move in for the kill. Now I was hunting her back. And unlike Victoria, I didn't intend to wait. The call came on a Saturday morning, 11 days after my meeting with Sandra. I was in my garden, pruning the rose bushes Richard had planted for our 20th anniversary. The thorns bit into my fingers through my gloves, small pricks of pain that felt almost purifying. Real sensation, real consequence. So different from the numbness that had wrapped around me for years. Victoria's name flashed on my phone screen. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. Margaret. Her voice was warm, sweet, perfectly calibrated. I'm so glad I caught you. Do you have a minute? I'm in the garden. What do you need? A pause. Victoria wasn't used to directness from me, wasn't used to being asked to state her purpose up front. Well, I wanted to talk about something important. Derek's birthday is coming up next month, and I'm planning a surprise party. All his old friends from college, his co-workers, maybe 40 or 50 people. I've found a wonderful venue in Bellevue, the Cascade Room at the Hyatt. Very elegant. That sounds lovely. It is. The only issue is the deposit. Her voice shifted into that familiar register, apologetic, slightly vulnerable, utterly calculated. They need $8,500 to hold the date. And with Emma's preschool tuition coming due and the car payment. No. The word came out clean and sharp, cutting through her explanation like a blade. Silence. I could hear Victoria breathing, recalibrating. I'm sorry. Did you say no? I did. Margaret, I don't think you understand. This is for Derek, your son. He's been so stressed lately with work, and I thought a celebration would. I understand perfectly, Victoria. The answer is still no. Another pause. Longer this time. When she spoke again, the warmth had evaporated from her voice. May I ask why? You may ask, but I'm not required to explain myself. I heard something crash in the background. A mug, perhaps, or a glass. Victoria's composure was cracking. Margaret, I don't know what's gotten into you lately. First the birthday party for Emma, now this. We're family. Families help each other. That's an interesting definition of family. I kept my voice level, conversational. In my experience, family involves mutual respect and honesty, not spreadsheets calculating when I'll die and how much I'm worth. Dead silence. I could almost hear Victoria's mind racing, trying to figure out what I knew and how I'd learned it. I don't know what you're talking about, she said finally. Her voice had gone cold, flat. The mask was slipping. I think you do, but that's a conversation for another time. I looked at my rose bushes, their thorns gleaming in the morning sun. The answer is no, Victoria. To the party, to any future requests. I'm done. You're done. A harsh laugh. You don't get to be done. You don't get to just. Goodbye, Victoria. I ended the call and turned off my phone. For a long moment, I stood in my garden, breathing in the scent of roses and fresh earth. My heart was pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins. But underneath the fear, there was something else. Freedom. For the first time in years, I'd said no. I'd refused to be the compliant old woman, the endless source of money and validation. I'd drawn a line. It felt terrifying, and it felt wonderful. Derek called that afternoon. I'd turned my phone back on, knowing he would reach out. "Mom, what happened?" "Victoria's in tears. She says you accused her of something awful." "What exactly did she tell you?" "That you said something about spreadsheets and waiting for you to die." "Mom, that's crazy. Victoria would never." "Derek," I cut him off. "Did you get the documents I asked for? The bank statements, the tax returns?" A pause. "I'm working on it. It's complicated. Victoria keeps everything password protected, and then you don't have them." "I will. I just need more time." "How much time?" "A week, maybe 2. I closed my eyes. Harold had warned me about this. "Trust is earned," he'd said. "Love can make us blind." "Derek, I want to believe you. I want to believe that you're on my side, that you're trying to help. But I need you to understand something." "What?" "I'm not going to be the fool anymore. I'm not going to wait patiently while promises get made and broken. Either you're with me, completely and honestly, or you're not." "Mom, of course I'm with you. You're my mother. Then prove it. Get me those documents." And Derek, "Yeah? Be careful what you tell Victoria. About this conversation, about anything. She's more dangerous than you realize." I hung up before he could respond. The next 10 days were quiet. Ominously quiet. Victoria didn't call. Derek sent occasional texts, short, neutral, updating me on Emma's activities without mentioning anything substantive. The surface of our family life appeared undisturbed. But beneath the surface, I was preparing. Diana Okoye, the private investigator Harold had recommended, was worth every penny of her $15,000 retainer. A former FBI agent with 20 years of experience, she approached Victoria's background with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent her career unraveling complex cases. We met in person for the first time on June 2nd, in a coffee shop near Pike Place Market. Diana was in her early 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that seemed to absorb information like a sponge. She carried a leather messenger bag stuffed with files. "I've been doing this for a long time," she said, setting down her cup. "I've investigated corporate fraud, insurance scams, cheating spouses, but your daughter-in-law." She shook her head. "She's something special." "Special how?" Diana opened her bag and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Victoria Ann Hayes, born October 15, 1993, in Spokane, Washington. Only child of Thomas and Patricia Hayes. Private school education. Degree in business from Gonzaga University. MBA from University of Washington. I know all that. What you don't know is that Victoria's been named in 7 civil complaints over the past 12 years. Diana spread papers across the table. 2 breach of contract suits from former business partners. 1 defamation claim from a college roommate. 1 restraining order filed by a former boyfriend. And 3 allegations of elder financial abuse, all of which were settled confidentially before reaching court. I stared at the papers. Victoria's name appeared on each one, accompanied by legal language describing manipulation, fraud, and exploitation. How is she not in prison? Because she's careful, and because she has money. Diana tapped one of the documents. Every single case was settled out of court. The plaintiffs took payments in exchange for signing NDAs and withdrawing their complaints. Victoria's family has spent nearly $2 million over the years making her problems disappear. But the death in Spokane, the widower she married, William Garrett, age 68, married Victoria in March 2012, died in September 2012. Diana pulled out a coroner's report. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrest. No autopsy requested. His estate, valued at $1.4 million, went entirely to Victoria. No autopsy. The family tried to contest the will, claimed Victoria had manipulated him, but they couldn't prove anything. And without an autopsy, there was no way to determine if his death was truly natural. Diana's expression was grim. The family ran out of money for legal fees before the case could go to trial. They settled for a fraction of the estate. I thought about William Garrett, a man in his late 60s, probably lonely after losing a spouse, looking for companionship. And Victoria had found him, charmed him, married him, and 6 months later he was dead. Do you think she killed him? Diana was quiet for a long moment. I think Victoria Hayes is pathologically focused on acquiring wealth and control. I think she targets vulnerable people, the elderly, the grieving, the lonely, and exploits them systematically. Whether she actually killed William Garrett. She shrugged. I can't prove it, but I also can't rule it out. What about Derek? Did she target him the same way? Diana pulled out another folder. Based on my investigation, yes. Victoria identified Derek as a potential target approximately 14 months before they met. She had detailed intelligence about your family's finances, Derek's personality profile, even his daily routines. The chance meeting at the conference mixer was carefully orchestrated. Sandra Chen told me she provided information to Patricia Hayes. Sandra was one of 3 sources. Diana handed me a list of names. Victoria also cultivated a contact at the bank where your husband had his business accounts. And she obtained information from a real estate agent who'd worked with Richard on commercial property deals. 3 sources. 3 people who'd known Richard, who I trusted, who'd sold information about our family to the woman who was now trying to destroy me. Is there enough here to go to the police? Diana hesitated. That's complicated. The civil complaints were all settled. The plaintiffs can't testify. The Garrett death was ruled natural causes. Sandra Chen could potentially be a witness, but her own complicity would undermine her credibility. So she gets away with it. No. Diana closed her folders and looked at me directly. She doesn't get away with it. We just have to be smarter about how we take her down. What do you suggest? Victoria's greatest strength is her ability to maintain appearances. She's charming, sympathetic, respectable. People look at her and see a devoted mother, a loving wife, a pillar of the community. Diana leaned forward. We need to destroy that image. We need to show people who she really is. How? By getting her to show them herself. The plan Diana outlined was elegant in its simplicity. Victoria was a master manipulator, but she had one weakness: arrogance. She believed she was smarter than everyone around her. She believed no one would ever challenge her, ever catch on to her schemes, ever fight back. That arrogance made her careless, and carelessness created opportunities. Based on my profiling, Diana explained, Victoria escalates when she feels threatened. The more pressure you put on her, the more aggressive she becomes. And when she's aggressive, she makes mistakes. So you want me to provoke her. I want you to apply steady, consistent pressure. Keep saying no. Keep cutting off the money. Let her know, subtly, that you're on to her schemes. Diana smiled grimly. She'll respond. And when she does, we'll be ready. Ready how? Diana reached into her bag and pulled out a small device. This is a digital voice recorder. Higher quality than the one Harold gave you. It runs continuously for 72 hours, uploads automatically to a secure cloud server, and looks exactly like an ordinary pen. I took the device, turning it over in my hands. Keep it with you at all times, Diana continued. Every conversation with Victoria, every phone call, every interaction, record it all. We need her saying something incriminating in her own voice. What if she's too careful? What if she doesn't say anything useful? She will. Diana's confidence was absolute. I've seen her type before. They can maintain the mask for a while, but eventually the pressure builds. Eventually they crack. And when Victoria cracks, she'll say things she can never take back. I drove home from that meeting feeling something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Not naive hope, not the blind optimism that had allowed me to be exploited for so long. This was different. Strategic hope. The hope of a woman who finally understood the game she was playing and had the tools to win. Harold called as I pulled into my driveway. Margaret, I have news. The trust documents are finalized. Your house is protected, and I've completed the review of your finances you requested. What did you find? You've given Derek and Victoria approximately $194,000 over the past 4 years. That's slightly higher than your original estimate. $194,000, nearly $200,000, enough to buy a house in some parts of the country, enough to fund a comfortable retirement. Is there any way to recover it? Legally, no. Gifts are gifts. But there's something else you should know. What? I had my forensic accountant look at the pattern of transfers. The requests always came at specific times. End of month, end of quarter, and always for amounts just under certain reporting thresholds. It's the kind of pattern you see in structured financial exploitation. Meaning what? Meaning Victoria knew exactly what she was doing. She timed the requests to avoid triggering bank fraud alerts. She kept the amounts low enough to avoid IRS gift reporting requirements. This wasn't opportunistic extraction, it was systematic. More evidence of Victoria's methodical approach. More proof that I'd been harvested like a crop, carefully and deliberately. Thank you, Harold. Is there anything else I need to know? Just one thing. His voice softened. I received a call this morning from a law firm in Spokane, Williams and Associates. They represent Patricia Hayes. My grip tightened on the phone. What did they want? They were inquiring about your estate plan. Claimed to be reaching out on behalf of concerned family members who wanted to ensure your affairs were in order. They're fishing. Trying to find out what I've done to protect myself. That's my assessment as well. I told them nothing, of course. Attorney-client privilege. But Margaret, he paused. They're circling. Victoria and her family know something has changed. They're trying to figure out how much you know and what you're planning. Let them circle. I looked at my house. The house Richard and I had built together. The house Victoria wanted to take from me. When they're ready to make their move, I'll be ready too. The confrontation came sooner than expected. June 8th, 2 days before my self-imposed deadline. I was in my kitchen making dinner when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I watched Victoria step out of her Mercedes, smooth her skirt, and walk toward my front door with the confident stride of someone who believed she was in control. She hadn't called ahead, hadn't asked permission. She was simply arriving, expecting to be admitted, expecting me to fall back into the pattern of compliance and accommodation. My hand went to the pen in my shirt pocket, Diana's recorder, already running. The doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel, took a deep breath, and went to face my enemy. Victoria stood on my porch, her expression perfectly composed. Behind her, I could see Patricia Hayes sitting in the passenger seat of the Mercedes, watching. Margaret. Victoria's voice was honey-sweet. May I come in? We need to talk. I stepped aside without answering. Some battles were better fought on your own ground. She walked into my living room, her eyes scanning the space the way a predator scans territory. Looking for weakness. Looking for opportunity. I see you've redecorated, she said. New furniture? I've been making some changes. Clearly. She turned to face me, the mask of sweetness beginning to slip. Margaret, I'm going to be direct. Something has changed with you over the past few weeks, and I'm concerned. Concerned about what? About your mental state. She said it gently, the way you might speak to a confused child. Derek tells me you've been making strange accusations, talking about spreadsheets and conspiracies, refusing to help with family expenses. Is that what he told you? He's worried, Margaret. We're all worried. This isn't like you. I walked to my armchair and sat down, leaving Victoria standing. A small power play, but every advantage mattered. What exactly are you worried about, Victoria? That I've stopped being your personal ATM. That I'm no longer willing to fund your lifestyle while you wait for me to die. The mask cracked. Just for a moment, I saw the real Victoria underneath, cold, calculating, furious. I don't know what you think you know, she said, her voice hardening, but you're making a mistake. A big mistake. Am I? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I smiled. Actually, Victoria, I think I do. I know about William Garrett. I know about the civil complaints and the NDAs. I know about the trust fund you've been hiding from Derek. I know about Sandra Chen and the other sources who fed you information about my family. Victoria's face went pale. You can't possibly. I can, I did, and I'm not done. For a long moment, we stared at each other. Two women on opposite sides of a war that had been raging for years without my knowledge. But now I was awake. Now I was fighting back. You need to understand something, Margaret. Victoria's voice dropped to a near whisper. I have resources you can't imagine. Connections. Options. If you push me, I will push back. And you won't like what happens. Is that a threat? It's a promise. She stepped closer, looming over my chair. Drop this. Whatever investigation you're running, whatever legal games you're playing, stop. Go back to being the sweet grandmother who writes checks and doesn't ask questions. And I'll forget this ever happened. I stood up, bringing us face to face. No. The word hung in the air between us. You don't get to threaten me in my own home. I continued. You don't get to steal my money, poison my relationship with my son, and plan my institutionalization while I smile and thank you for the privilege. Those days are over, Victoria. Permanently. For a moment, I saw something flash in Victoria's eyes. Not fear exactly. Something more like calculation, reassessment. Then the mask slammed back into place. Fine. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Have it your way, Margaret. But remember, you started this. And I finish what I start. She was gone before I could respond, the door slamming behind her. I stood in my empty living room, my heart pounding, my hands trembling. The war had begun. Victoria's retaliation began 3 days after our confrontation. It started small. A phone call from my neighbor, Helen, asking if everything was all right. She'd heard from someone at her book club that I'd been acting strangely, forgetting things, wandering the neighborhood at odd hours. I told them it was nonsense, Helen said, her voice uncertain. But Margaret, is there anything you need to tell me? Any problems you're having? I assured her I was fine, thanked her for her concern, hung up and stood at my kitchen window, watching the quiet street where I'd lived for 32 years. The campaign had started. The rumors spread like wildfire through Maple Heights. By the end of the first week, I'd received 5 phone calls from concerned acquaintances, 2 visits from neighbors I barely knew, and a pamphlet about memory care facilities left anonymously in my mailbox. The stories were varied but consistent in their theme. Margaret Chen was losing her mind. Margaret Chen had been seen talking to herself in the grocery store. Margaret Chen had accused her daughter-in-law of terrible things without any evidence. Margaret Chen needed help before something happened. The source of the rumors was never named directly, but I didn't need a detective to figure it out. Victoria was laying the groundwork, establishing a narrative of decline, creating witnesses who would later testify that they'd noticed signs of dementia long before any official diagnosis. It was exactly what Diana had predicted. And it was terrifying. Don't engage with the rumors directly, Diana advised during our phone call. That plays into her hands. The more you defend yourself, the more people will wonder if there's something to defend against. So, I just let her destroy my reputation. You let her think she's destroying your reputation. Meanwhile, we document everything. Every rumor, every source, every connection back to Victoria. When this goes to court, and it will go to court, we'll have a paper trail showing systematic defamation. Court. The word felt both reassuring and exhausting. I was 67 years old. I should have been tending my garden, visiting my granddaughter, enjoying the years I had left. Instead, I was preparing for legal warfare against my own family. The second week brought escalation. I came home from grocery shopping on a Tuesday afternoon to find a notice taped to my front door. Official looking, printed on county letterhead. Welfare check notification. This residence was visited by Maple Heights Police Department on June 15, 2022, in response to a welfare concern reported by a family member. Resident was not home at time of visit. Please contact Officer Martinez at your earliest convenience. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and dialed the number. Officer Martinez, this is Margaret Chen. I received a notice about a welfare check at my address. A pause. Papers shuffling. Yes, Mrs. Chen. We received the call yesterday from your daughter-in-law, a Victoria Flores. She expressed concern that you might be a danger to yourself or others. Mentioned confusion, erratic behavior, possible dementia. And you came to my house based on that. We're required to follow up on all welfare concerns, ma'am. Just doing our job. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm, to not give Victoria another weapon to use against me. Officer Martinez, I appreciate your diligence, but I want to be very clear. I am not confused, I am not erratic, and I am not a danger to anyone. My daughter-in-law and I are involved in a family dispute. She is using your department to harass and intimidate me. Another pause. When Officer Martinez spoke again, his voice was more careful. Ma'am, are you saying this was a false report? I'm saying my daughter-in-law has a documented history of making false allegations against people she perceives as obstacles. I have an attorney and a private investigator who can provide evidence of this pattern if needed. I see. More paper shuffling. Well, Mrs. Chen, I've noted your response. If we receive additional calls, we may need to conduct a formal wellness evaluation. I understand. Thank you for letting me know. After I hung up, I sat down at my kitchen table and let the fear wash over me. A formal wellness evaluation. That was the first step toward a conservatorship hearing. That was Victoria's endgame. Have me declared incompetent. take control of my assets, ship me off to the facility in Tacoma her mother had already researched. And she was getting closer. I called an emergency meeting with Harold and Diana that evening. "She's accelerating," Diana said, spreading her notes across Harold's conference table. "The welfare check, the rumor campaign, the pamphlets, this is phase 2 of her playbook. She's building a case for incompetency. How do we stop her? We get ahead of her." Harold pulled out a document. "I've arranged an independent psychiatric evaluation with Dr. Okonkwo, the specialist I mentioned. She can see you tomorrow morning. If we have a professional assessment confirming your mental competency on file before Victoria makes any formal moves, it undercuts her entire strategy." "What about the police? Will they keep coming if she keeps calling?" "Probably." Diana's expression was grim. "But each call she makes is documented. Each false report strengthens our harassment case. Victoria doesn't know it, but she's building evidence against herself." I looked between them, my lawyer, my investigator, the team I'd assembled to protect myself from my own family. "There's something else," I said. "Derek, he's supposed to be getting me those financial documents, but every time I ask, he has excuses. I'm starting to think." I couldn't finish the sentence. "You're starting to think he's playing both sides," Diana completed, "or that Victoria's gotten to him, convinced him I really am losing my mind." Harold and Diana exchanged a look. "Margaret," Harold said gently, "we need to discuss the possibility that Derek is not going to be the ally you hoped for. He's my son. He's also Victoria's husband, the father of her child, the man who stood by for years while she exploited you." Harold's voice was kind but firm. "Love doesn't always translate to loyalty, and sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us most." I thought about Derek crying on my couch, swearing he hadn't known, about the emails he'd shown me, the horror on his face when he'd read Victoria's communications with her mother. Had that been real? Or had it been another performance, choreographed by a woman who'd been manipulating people her entire life? "I don't know what to believe anymore," I admitted. "Then believe in yourself." Diana reached across the table and took my hand. "Believe in the evidence we're gathering. Believe in the legal protections Harold has put in place. And trust that when this is over, the truth will be clear." Dr. Patricia Okonkwo's office was in a medical building near the university. The waiting room was deliberately soothing. Soft colors, landscape paintings, the kind of ambient music that was designed to lower blood pressure. I sat in a comfortable chair, filling out intake forms, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Mrs. Chen, a tall woman in her 50s, appeared in the doorway, her smile warm and professional. "I'm Dr. Okonkwo. Please come in." Her office was cluttered with books and papers, the desk of someone who spent more time reading than organizing. She gestured to a chair across from her and settled behind her desk with a notebook. "Harold Winters briefed me on your situation," she said. "I understand you're concerned about potential competency challenges from family members." "That's correct. Before we begin the formal evaluation, I want you to understand what we're doing here." She leaned forward, her eyes direct. "I'm not here to prove you're competent because your lawyer asked me to. I'm here to conduct an honest, thorough assessment. If I find concerns, I'll document them. If I don't, I'll document that too. My job is the truth, not advocacy. I wouldn't want it any other way." "Good." She smiled. "Then let's get started." The evaluation took 3 hours. Memory tests, cognitive assessments, detailed questions about my daily routines, my finances, my relationships. Dr. Okonkwo probed gently but thoroughly, looking for signs of confusion or impairment. I answered everything honestly. The fear I'd felt, the mistakes I'd made, the years of allowing myself to be exploited because I was too desperate for love to see the truth. "You blame yourself," Dr. Okonkwo observed near the end of our session, "for what happened with your daughter-in-law. Shouldn't I?" I gave them nearly $200,000. I ignored every warning sign. My husband saw through Victoria immediately, and I refused to listen. "Mrs. Chen, what you're describing isn't cognitive impairment. It's emotional vulnerability." Dr. Okonkwo set down her pen. "You'd lost your husband. You were grieving. Your son was all you had left, and his wife knew exactly how to exploit that. So I'm not crazy. You're not even close to crazy." Her voice was firm. "You're a grieving widow who was targeted by a skilled manipulator. The fact that you eventually recognized what was happening, that you sought help, assembled a team, began fighting back. That's evidence of strength, not weakness. I felt tears welling up, the first tears I'd allowed myself in weeks. Will you write that in your report? I'll write that you demonstrate no signs of cognitive decline, that your reasoning and memory are fully intact, and that in my professional opinion, any attempt to have you declared incompetent would be without medical basis. She handed me a tissue. I'll also note that you've been subjected to what appears to be a coordinated campaign of psychological manipulation, and that such campaigns can cause significant emotional distress even in mentally healthy individuals. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Her expression sobered. My report will help protect you legally, but it won't stop your daughter-in-law from trying other approaches. People like her don't give up easily, I know, but at least now I have evidence on my side. Derek called that evening. His voice was strange, strained, uncertain. Mom, we need to talk. Can I come over? When? Now. Tonight. I looked at the clock, 9:17 p.m., late for a casual visit. Something had happened. Come, I said. He arrived 20 minutes later, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes rumpled like he'd been sleeping in them. Derek, what's wrong? He walked past me into the living room and collapsed onto the couch. Victoria knows. About the investigation, about the lawyer, about everything. My blood went cold. How? I don't know. She found something, or someone told her, or... He ran his hands through his hair. She's been going through my phone, my emails. I thought I was being careful, but she's always been better at this than me. What did she say? She didn't say anything. That's what scared me. He looked up at me, his eyes haunted. She just smiled. This cold, terrible smile. And then she said, "Your mother is going to regret this. You all are." I sat down across from him, my mind racing. Did she say what she was planning? No. But Mom, she was on the phone with her father for 2 hours tonight. In their bedroom, with the door locked. I tried to listen, but I couldn't hear anything. He leaned forward. Something's coming. Something big. I can feel it. Derek, I need those financial documents. Whatever you have, whatever you can get. I need them now. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive. I copied everything I could access. Bank statements, tax returns, investment accounts. It's not complete. She has other accounts I don't have passwords for. But it's something. I took the drive, feeling its small weight in my palm. Thank you. There's more. His voice dropped to a whisper. I found something in her email, a message from her mother, from 2 days ago. What did it say? It said, "The Tacoma situation is resolved. Bed available immediately. Transport can be arranged within 48 hours of court order." The words hit me like physical blows. The Tacoma situation. A bed available. Transport within 48 hours. They weren't just planning to have me declared incompetent. They were planning to remove me, to take me from my home, put me in a van, and deliver me to a facility where I would be trapped, isolated, controlled. And according to that email, they were ready to move. When was the court hearing scheduled? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. I don't know. I couldn't find anything about that. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the night was quiet, normal. The houses on my street glowed with warmth, families going about their evening routines, unaware that their neighbor was fighting for her freedom. Derek, I said without turning around, I need you to make a choice. Right now, tonight. What choice? You can go back to Victoria. Pretend this conversation never happened. Help her do whatever she's planning to do. I turned to face him. Or you can stay with me. Fight with me. Help me stop her. Mom, of course I'm going to help you. I told you. No. I cut him off. I need more than words. I need action. If you're really on my side, you need to leave Victoria. Tonight. Take Emma and come here. His face went pale. Leave her. Mom, I can't just. Yes, you can. You can walk out of that house, put your daughter in the car, and drive away. You can file for emergency custody in the morning. You can choose your mother over the woman who's been exploiting us both for years. She'll fight me. She'll take everything. She's going to take everything anyway, Derek. The only question is whether you stand with me or against me when it happens. He stared at me for a long moment. I could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Fear versus love. Comfort versus conscience. The path of least resistance versus the path that was right. I need time, he said finally. Just a few days. To figure out how to do this without making things worse. We don't have a few days. Victoria is planning to move against me now. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe the day after. Then let me go back tonight. One more night. I'll get Emma to bed, wait until Victoria's asleep, and then, he swallowed. Then I'll bring her here. In the middle of the night. Victoria won't even know we're gone until morning. I studied my son's face. The desperation in his eyes. The fear. Was this a promise he would keep? Or another delay, another excuse, another way to avoid making the hard choice? I didn't know, but I also didn't have options. One night, I said, if you're not here with Emma by 6 a.m., I'll know where you stand. He nodded and stood, hugging me tightly. I love you, Mom. I know I haven't shown it, but I do. Then show me now. He left without another word, his headlights disappearing down the dark street. I closed the door and locked it. Then I walked to the phone and called Harold. We need to accelerate everything, I said when he answered. Victoria knows about the investigation. She's planning to move against me immediately. How soon? Days. Maybe hours. Meet me at my office tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring everything you have. I will. I hung up and sat in the darkness of my living room, the USB drive clutched in my hand. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tomorrow would bring confrontation. Tomorrow, one way or another, this would end. Derek didn't come at 6 a.m. I sat at my kitchen table watching the clock, coffee growing cold in my hands, waiting for headlights that never appeared. 6:15, 6:30, 6:47. By 7 a.m., I had my answer. My son had made his choice, and it wasn't me. I should have felt devastated, should have collapsed under the weight of that final betrayal. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Clarity. The last thread of false hope had been cut. There was no one left to protect. No relationship left to salvage. I was free to do what needed to be done. I showered, dressed in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to Richard's funeral, and drove to Harold's office. The USB drive Derek gave you contains explosive material, Harold said, spreading printouts across his conference table. Bank statements showing Victoria's trust fund distributions totaling $2.3 million over the past 4 years. Investment accounts in her name alone worth another $400,000. And this, he tapped a highlighted document. A joint account with Patricia Hayes containing $847,000. She's been hiding over $3.5 million while taking money from me. It gets worse. Diana stepped forward, adding her own documents to the pile. I traced the Tacoma facility Patricia mentioned. It's called Evergreen Meadows. Private psychiatric care, specializing in patients with dementia and cognitive disorders. Psychiatric care? The admission paperwork requires either voluntary commitment or a court order. But here's the interesting part. Diana pulled up a photo on her laptop. The facility is owned by a holding company called PMH Investments. The PMH stands for Patricia Morrison Hayes. I stared at the screen. Victoria's mother owns the facility they were planning to put me in. Owns it outright. Bought it in 2019 for $4.2 million. Diana's expression was grim. This wasn't just about taking your assets, Margaret. They were going to institutionalize you in a facility they controlled. No oversight, no accountability. You would have been completely at their mercy. The full horror of their plan washed over me. Not just stealing my money, not just taking my house. They were going to imprison me, lock me away in a building owned by my tormentors, where no one would hear my protests, where any complaint could be dismissed as the ravings of a demented old woman. What do we do? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Harold and Diana exchanged a look. We have enough evidence to file criminal charges, Harold said. Elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy. Diana's already briefed the district attorney's office. They're very interested. But criminal cases take time. Months, maybe years. And in the meantime, Victoria is still out there. Still dangerous. So we do both, Diana said. We pursue the criminal case through official channels, and we destroy her publicly. How? Diana smiled. Victoria's greatest weapon has always been her reputation. Her ability to seem respectable, sympathetic, trustworthy. We take that away, and she has nothing. I'm listening. The plan came together over the next 4 hours. Victoria and Patricia were hosting a charity luncheon that afternoon at the Maple Heights Country Club, a fundraiser for the local children's hospital, attended by the most prominent families in the community. The kind of event where reputation was everything. The kind of event where reputations could be destroyed. "We have one chance at this," Diana explained. "If we move too soon, Victoria will lawyer up and go silent. If we wait too long, she might realize we're coming and disappear." "She won't disappear," I said. "She's too arrogant. She thinks she's won. Then let's prove her wrong." I arrived at the Maple Heights Country Club at 1:47 p.m. The parking lot was full of Mercedes and BMWs, the sidewalk crowded with women in designer dresses and men in tailored suits. The charity circuit of upper-middle-class Seattle gathered to write checks and feel good about themselves. Victoria's hunting ground. I spotted her immediately through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main ballroom. She was holding court near the silent auction table, Patricia at her side, both of them radiating the kind of polished charm that had fooled me for years. Derek stood slightly apart from them, Emma in his arms. He looked uncomfortable, out of place, like a man who knew he'd made a terrible mistake but couldn't figure out how to fix it. Our eyes met through the glass. I saw him stiffen, saw the panic flash across his features. I didn't look away. The entrance was manned by a young woman with a clipboard. "I'm sorry, ma'am, this is a private event. Are you on the guest list?" "No." I walked past her without stopping, but I suspect I'm expected anyway. The murmur started the moment I entered the ballroom. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. The comfortable buzz of wealthy people congratulating themselves on their generosity went suddenly, ominously quiet. Victoria saw me and froze. Just for a moment, a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. I saw the predator beneath, calculating, assessing, deciding how to handle this unexpected development. Then the mask was back, and she was moving toward me with a concerned smile. "Margaret, what a surprise." Her voice carried across the room, pitched perfectly to reach every ear. "We've all been so worried about you. Are you feeling all right?" She was playing to the audience, establishing the narrative. Poor confused Margaret, wandering into events where she wasn't wanted. I'd expected this. I was ready. "I'm feeling better than I have in years, Victoria." My voice was calm, measured. "In fact, I feel like I'm finally seeing clearly for the first time." "That's wonderful to hear." Victoria reached for my arm, her grip gentle but insistent. "Why don't we step outside and talk? I'm sure everyone here would prefer to know the truth." I pulled my arm free. "About you. About your family. About what you've been doing to me for the past 4 years." The room went absolutely silent. Patricia appeared at Victoria's elbow, her face tight with barely concealed fury. "Margaret, this is neither the time nor the place for family disputes. If you have concerns, we can discuss them privately. We've discussed things privately for 4 years." I reached into my purse and pulled out a stack of documents. "I think it's time for a more public conversation." "What is this?" Victoria's composure was beginning to crack. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm telling people who you really are." I turned to address the room. "My name is Margaret Chen. Some of you know me. I've lived in Maple Heights for 32 years. My husband Richard built a business here. We raised our son here. We thought we were part of this community." I paused, letting the words settle. 4 years ago, my son married Victoria Hayes. I welcomed her into our family. I trusted her. And over those 4 years, she systematically extracted nearly $200,000 from me through manipulation and lies. Gasps, murmurs. Victoria's face had gone pale. "That's not true," she said quickly. "Margaret has been confused lately. She's been making accusations. I have the bank statements." I held up the first document. Every transfer documented, every request cataloged. $47,000 for a down payment. $35,000 for a wedding. Thousands more for emergencies that never existed. She gave us that money willingly. Victoria's voice was rising. "We never forced her. You told me you were struggling, that you'd grown up poor, that you needed help." I pulled out the next document. "But I have records showing that you have a trust fund worth $2.3 million, that your family is worth tens of millions, that you never needed a single dollar from me." The murmurs grew louder. I could see people in the crowd pulling out phones, recording. And when I finally started asking questions, When I started protecting myself, you tried to have me declared incompetent. I pulled out the emails Diana had obtained. Communications between you and your mother, planning to put me in a psychiatric facility that your family owns. A facility where I would have been trapped, silenced, unable to tell anyone what you'd done. Victoria's mask had completely shattered now. Her face was twisted with rage, her voice shrieked. You have no right. I have every right. I stepped closer to her, close enough to see the hatred burning in her eyes. You called me an old burden. You said you were waiting for me to die. You tracked my assets like a vulture circling a wounded animal. I turned to face the crowd one last time. This woman is not who she pretends to be. She's a predator who targets vulnerable people, the elderly, the grieving, the lonely. I'm not her first victim. I know of at least 3 others, including a man in Spokane who died 6 months after marrying her under circumstances that were never properly investigated. The room erupted. Victoria grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. You lying old bitch, she hissed. You have no proof of any of this. You're just a pathetic, crazy old woman who, actually, she has extensive proof. The voice came from the entrance. I turned to see Diana Okoye walking toward us, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. Victoria Hayes Flores. The lead officer stepped forward. You're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. Victoria's scream cut through the room like a knife. You can't do this. Do you know who my father is? Do you know who my family is? Ma'am, please turn around and place your hands behind your back. Derek. Victoria whirled toward my son, who was standing frozen near the silent auction table, Emma still in his arms. Derek, do something. Call my father. Call our lawyer. Derek didn't move. His eyes were fixed on me, his face a mask of shock and something that might have been relief. Derek. Victoria's voice had become a shriek. Don't just stand there. Help me. I can't. His voice was quiet, broken. I'm done, Victoria. I'm done helping you hurt people. The officers moved in, cuffing Victoria's hands behind her back. She was still screaming. Threats, curses, promises of retaliation, as they led her toward the exit. Patricia tried to intervene, stepping into the officer's path. This is outrageous. This is harassment. My daughter is a respected member of this community. Ma'am, please step aside. We have a warrant for your arrest as well. Patricia's face went white. My arrest? On what charges? Conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Falsifying medical records. The officer produced a second set of handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. I watched them lead both women out of the ballroom, their screams echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Around me, the crowd buzzed with shock and excitement, phones recording everything, the carefully cultivated world of the Maple Heights elite suddenly and spectacularly disrupted. Derek approached me slowly, Emma clutching his neck. Mom. His voice was raw. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't come this morning. I wanted to, but Victoria was watching, and I was scared and... I know. I reached out and touched his cheek. I know, Derek. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at my son, the baby I'd held in my arms, the boy I'd raised, the man who'd failed me in so many ways over so many years. I looked at Emma, my granddaughter, her eyes wide with confusion at the chaos around her. Forgiveness takes time, I said. Trust takes even longer, but I'm willing to try, Derek. If you are. He broke down then, tears streaming down his face, Emma patting his cheek and asking why Daddy was sad. I held them both, my son and my granddaughter, while around us the world Victoria had built came crashing down. The police finished taking statements at 4:30 p.m. Diana found me sitting on a bench outside the country club, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Victoria and Patricia are being processed now, she said, sitting down beside me. Bail hearing tomorrow. Given the charges and the evidence, I doubt they'll be released. What about Thomas Hayes, Victoria's father? The district attorney is building a case. It'll take time, but there's enough evidence to connect him to the conspiracy. He'll face charges eventually. I nodded slowly. And the facility? Evergreen Meadows? State inspectors are on their way. Based on what we've uncovered, there may be other victims. Other elderly people who were institutionalized inappropriately, while the Hayes family extracted their assets. Other victims. The thought was horrifying and somehow comforting at the same time. I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. Victoria had done this before, would have done it again, would have kept doing it until someone stopped her. Someone had stopped her. I had stopped her. What happens now? I asked. Now you rest. Diana put her hand on my shoulder. You've been fighting for months. It's time to let the legal system take over. And Derek? And Emma? That's up to you. Derek will need support through the divorce proceedings. Emma will need stability. They're your family, Margaret. Whatever Victoria did, that hasn't changed. I thought about what Harold had said weeks ago. Love doesn't always translate to loyalty. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us most. But sometimes the people closest to us are also the ones worth fighting for. Derek drove me home that evening. Emma fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted by a day she was too young to understand. I found an apartment, Derek said as we pulled into my driveway. Signed the lease this morning, before I lost my nerve. I was going to tell you tonight, after I got Emma settled. That's why you didn't come this morning. You were signing a lease, and packing, and making sure Victoria didn't suspect anything. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. I know I've failed you, Mom. Over and over. But I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be the man Dad raised me to be. I reached over and took his hand. Then keep trying. That's all any of us can do. He carried Emma into my guest room and laid her gently on the bed, tucking her under the quilts my mother had made decades ago. I stood in the doorway watching my son tend to his daughter, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not naive hope. Not the blind optimism that had allowed me to be exploited for so long. Real hope, the kind that comes from seeing the worst and surviving it. The kind that knows the road ahead is hard, but believes the journey is worth taking. Good night, Mom, Derek said, kissing my forehead on his way to the couch. Thank you. For fighting. For not giving up. For being stronger than any of us deserved. Good night, Derek. I walked through my house, Richard's house, our house, turning off lights, checking locks, performing the small rituals of safety that had become second nature over months of fear. The last light I switched off was in the living room, where Richard's photo still held its place of honor on the mantel. We did it, I whispered to his image. We stopped her. The photo didn't answer. Richard had been gone for 3 years, and he wasn't coming back. But somehow, standing in the darkness of my home with my son sleeping on the couch and my granddaughter safe in the guest room, I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt like myself again. 6 months later, December had returned to Maple Heights, bringing with it the soft gray skies and gentle rains that made Seattle winters feel like a meditation. The maple trees in my backyard have lost their leaves months ago, their bare branches reaching toward the sky like prayers. I stood at my kitchen window, watching Emma chase the neighbor's cat across the frost-covered lawn. Her laughter echoed through the cold air, pure and uncomplicated, the sound of a child who had no memory of the storm that had nearly destroyed our family. She was 3.5 now, old enough to ask questions about where Mommy had gone, but young enough to accept simple answers. Mommy is away for a while, Derek told her, but Nai and Daddy are here. We're not going anywhere. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough truth for a child who needed stability more than explanations. The trials had concluded in October. Victoria was convicted on 12 counts of elder financial abuse, 4 counts of fraud, and 2 counts of conspiracy. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Martinez, who had seen too many cases like mine, sentenced her to 8 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 5. The defendant showed no remorse throughout these proceedings, Judge Martinez said during sentencing. She manipulated vulnerable people for financial gain, exploited family relationships, and when confronted with evidence of her crimes, attempted to have her primary victim institutionalized against her will. This court has rarely seen such calculated cruelty. Victoria stood motionless as the sentence was read, her face a mask of controlled fury. She'd maintained her innocence throughout the trial, claiming she was the victim of a vindictive mother-in-law and an incompetent husband. The jury hadn't believed her. Neither had anyone else. Patricia Hayes received 6 years for her role in the conspiracy. Thomas Hayes, Victoria's father, was still awaiting trial on charges related to Evergreen Meadows. The facility had been shut down after state inspectors discovered 17 other residents who had been inappropriately committed, their assets systematically drained into accounts controlled by the Hayes family. 17 other people, 17 other Margarets, trapped and silenced and stolen from. The knowledge haunted me, but it also validated everything I'd fought for. I hadn't just saved myself. I'd exposed a system of exploitation that had been operating for years, hidden behind the respectable facade of charity luncheons and country club memberships. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in November. I recognized the prison's return address immediately. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope, though I'd known this day would come eventually. Dear Margaret, I've had a lot of time to think in here. 6 months of nothing but time.
And I've realized that I owe you an apology. Not for what I did. I still believe I was justified in protecting my family's interests. But for underestimating you. I never thought you had the strength to fight back. I thought you were just a weak old woman who would fade quietly into the background while I built the life I deserved. I was wrong. I'm writing because I need something from you. Derek has filed for full custody of Emma, and my lawyer says a statement from you could influence the judge's decision. If you would be willing to testify that I was a good mother, that Emma should have regular contact with me, I would be grateful. I know we've had our differences, but surely you can understand a mother's love for a child. Surely you can find it in your heart to help me maintain my relationship with my granddaughter. Please consider this request carefully. I may have made mistakes, but I don't deserve to lose Emma completely. Victoria. I read the letter 3 times, then I walked to my fireplace, struck a match, and watched it burn. Derek found me in the garden that afternoon, turning soil for the spring planting that was still months away. You got a letter, he said. It wasn't a question. I did. From Victoria? Yes. He sat down on the bench Richard had built, the one where we'd shared countless summer evenings watching Derek play in the sprinklers as a child. What did she want? She wanted me to testify on her behalf. To help her maintain custody of Emma. Derek's jaw tightened. And what did you say? I burned the letter. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I know she's Emma's mother, he said. I know that should mean something. But after everything she did, after what she tried to do to you, she made her choices, Derek. Now she lives with the consequences. Do you think Emma will hate us someday for keeping her away from her mother? I set down my trowel and sat beside him on the bench. I think Emma will grow up knowing she was loved. By you. By me. By this family we're rebuilding together. And when she's old enough to ask questions, we'll tell her the truth. The whole truth. Enough truth. The kind that helps her understand without destroying her. I took his hand. That's what parents do, Derek. We protect our children from the things that would hurt them, even when those things are other parents. Christmas came softly that year. No elaborate parties. No expensive gifts. No performative displays of holiday cheer designed to impress people who didn't matter. Just family. Derek and Emma moved into the house in September, into the rooms that had been empty since Richard died. The sound of a child's footsteps on the hardwood floors, of cartoons playing in the living room, of bedtime stories read in the guest room that was now Emma's room. These sounds filled spaces that had been silent for too long. Rosa came from Portland with her husband and their 2 grown children. We cooked together in the kitchen, for generations of our family crowded around the stove, arguing about spices and laughing at old stories. Richard would have loved this, Rosa said, watching Emma tear into her presence on Christmas morning. A full house again. He would have. I looked around at the faces of people who actually wanted me there. He always said this house was meant for love, not loneliness. You made that happen, Maggie. You fought for this. I almost didn't. I almost let them take everything. But you didn't. Rosa squeezed my hand. You found your strength when it mattered most. That's what matters. The money never came back, of course. The $194,000 I'd given Victoria and Derek over the years was gone, absorbed into a lifestyle that had been built on sand. The legal fees had taken another $67,000. Harold had given me a significant discount, but justice wasn't cheap. What remained was enough. The house was paid off. My pension and Social Security covered my expenses. I'd learned to live more simply, to find joy in things that didn't cost anything. Morning coffee on the back porch, watching the birds visit the feeder Derek had installed. Afternoon walks with Emma, her small hand in mine, her endless questions about everything we passed. Evening dinners with my son,
slowly rebuilding a relationship that had been damaged but not destroyed.
Harold had asked me once if I regretted the money, if I wished I'd been more careful, more suspicious, more protective of my assets.
I regret being foolish, I told him, but I don't regret being generous. That's who I am, who I've always been. Victoria exploited that generosity, but she didn't kill it. Most people would become cynical after what you went through. Most people aren't 67 years old with a granddaughter who needs to learn that the world isn't only full of predators. I
Smiled.
Emma will grow up knowing that her nine-eye gives freely, loves deeply, and fights fiercely when necessary. That seems like a better lesson than teaching her to trust no one. The last conversation I had about Victoria came in late December. Derek and I were sitting by the fireplace after Emma had gone to bed, sharing a bottle of wine and the comfortable silence of people who no longer needed to fill every moment with words.
She wrote to me too, he said suddenly. Victoria, last week.
What did she want? Money for her appeal. She's convinced she can get the conviction overturned if she has better lawyers. He shook his head. She still doesn't understand. She still thinks everything is about money. It always was, for her. Money and control. I keep trying to figure out if she ever loved me. If anything about our relationship was real. He stared into the fire. 7 years together.
A child together. And I don't know if any of it meant anything to her. Does it matter? I don't know. Maybe not. He looked at me. What I do know is that I loved you. I loved Dad.
And I let Victoria convince me that your love was worthless, that you were just an obstacle to be managed. Derek, no, let me finish. His voice was thick with emotion. You spent your whole life giving to me, supporting me,
loving me even when I didn't deserve it. And I repaid you by standing aside while my wife called you a burden and planned to have you locked away. You didn't know about most of that. I knew enough. I knew she treated you badly.
I knew she was taking your money. I knew you were lonely and sad and desperate for connection. He wiped his eyes. I knew all of that. And I did nothing. Because it was easier. Because standing up to Victoria was hard, and taking the path of least resistance was easy. You're standing up now. That matters. Does it?
Does it make up for all the years I failed you? I set down my wine glass and took my son's face in my hands, the way I had when he was a child with a scraped knee or a broken heart. Listen to me, Derek.
Forgiveness isn't about making up for the past. It's about choosing a different future. You can't undo what happened. You can't give me back the money, or the years, or the relationship we should have had. Then what can I do? You can be here. Now, present. You can be a good father to Emma. You can help me plant the garden in spring and fix the porch light that's been flickering for months. You can sit with me on quiet evenings and talk about nothing important. That's enough? That's everything. I pulled him into a hug. That's what family actually means. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts. Just being there, showing up.
Day after day, year after year, until the accumulated weight of small moments becomes something unbreakable. He held on to me like a drowning man holds a lifeline. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Derek. I never stopped.
Spring arrived early that year. By March, the first crocuses were pushing through the soil in my garden, purple and yellow heralds of warmer days to come. Emma helped me plant tomato seedlings in the raised beds Derek had built, her small fingers carefully patting down the dirt around each fragile stem.
Nai, why do we plant things that might not grow? She asked, her face serious with the weight of her 3-year-old wisdom.
Because hope is more important than certainty, I told her. We plant seeds because we believe in tomorrow.
Because we trust that if we do the work today,
something beautiful will come later. Even if it doesn't, even then, the planting itself matters. The care we take, the love we put into the soil. I brushed dirt from her cheek.
And most of the time, Emma, if we're patient and persistent, the seeds do grow.
The flowers do bloom. The tomatoes do ripen. She considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. Like Daddy came back. My heart clenched. Yes, sweetheart.
Like Daddy came back.
And like you stayed, even when the bad things happened. Yes, like I stayed. She nodded, satisfied with this explanation of the universe. Then she turned back to her seedlings, carefully watering each one with the small plastic watering can I bought her. I watched my granddaughter tend to new life in the garden Richard and I had planted together, and I felt something I'd almost forgotten was possible. Peace. There's a story I've told many times over the past 6 months. To friends who ask what happened. To support groups for elder abuse survivors that Diana connected me with. To reporters who wanted to write about Victoria's conviction. But there's one part of the story I've never shared publicly. One moment that stays private, held close to my heart like a precious stone. It happened the night after Victoria's arrest, after the country club chaos and the police statements, and the long drive home with Derek and Emma. I was sitting alone in my kitchen at 3 a.m., too wired to sleep, too exhausted to do anything useful. The house was quiet around me, my son and granddaughter asleep in rooms that had been empty for too long. And I heard Richard's voice. Not literally, of course. I'm not prone to mystical experiences, and I don't believe in ghosts. But in that moment of perfect stillness, I heard him as clearly as if he were sitting across the table from me. "You did it, Maggie. You found your strength." I almost didn't. I whispered to the empty room. I almost let them win. But you didn't. You fought. You survived. You protected our family. It took me so long to see the truth. You tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. You listened when it mattered. That's all any of us can do. I sat there in the dark, tears streaming down my face, having a conversation with a memory. With the man who'd loved me for 35 years, who'd seen the danger coming, who tried to protect me even from beyond the grave. "I miss you," I said, "every single day. I know, but you're not alone anymore, Maggie. Look around you. Look at what you've built." And I did look. At the house we'd filled with love. At the family photos on every wall. At the room where our granddaughter was sleeping, safe and protected because I'd refused to be destroyed. "That's your legacy," Richard's voice said. "Not the money, not the house. The love you fought to preserve. It's enough," I whispered. "It's finally enough." The voice faded then, leaving me alone in the quiet kitchen. But I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt complete. If you're listening to this story, you might be wondering what the point is. Is it a warning about predators like Victoria, who target vulnerable people and exploit their loneliness? Is it a call to action, urging you to protect your elderly relatives from financial abuse? Is it a tale of revenge, meant to satisfy your desire to see bad people punished? It's all of those things, but it's also something else. It's a reminder that it's never too late to fight back. I was 67 years old when I discovered the truth about my daughter-in-law. I was 67 when I assembled a team of lawyers and investigators. I was 67 when I stood up in front of a room full of strangers and exposed the woman who had been systematically destroying me. At an age when many people have given up, have accepted that their best days are behind them, I found strength I didn't know I had. You can find it too. Whatever battle you're facing, whether it's a predatory family member, a financial crisis, a health challenge, or simply the weight of loneliness that comes with growing older, you have more strength than you realize. More resilience, more capacity to fight. Don't let anyone convince you that you're just an old burden waiting to die. Don't let anyone reduce you to a line item on their spreadsheet, an asset to be extracted, an obstacle to be removed. You are a person. You have value. You deserve respect and dignity and love. And if someone tries to take those things from you, fight back. Fight with everything you have. Because the alternative, giving up, giving in, letting them win, is no way to live. And we're all still living, every one of us, until the very last moment. Emma is calling me from the garden. Something about a butterfly she's found. Something she wants Nai to see right now. This very second, because 3-year-olds don't understand patience. I'm going to go. I'm going to walk out into the spring sunshine and kneel in the dirt beside my granddaughter and pretend to be amazed by whatever ordinary miracle she's discovered. Because that's what life is, in the end. Not the dramatic confrontations, or the courtroom victories, or the moments of triumph over our enemies. It's the ordinary miracles, the small joys, the daily choice to keep loving, keep hoping, keep planting seeds that might not grow. Richard knew that. He knew it from the first day we moved into this house, when he promised me we'd fill it with so much love that the walls couldn't contain it. We did fill it, and then I almost let someone empty it out. But I found my strength. I fought back. And now the house is full again. Different than before. Scarred by what we've been through. But still standing. Still full of love. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. For the next story, click the box on the left. And remember, It's never too late to find your strength. It's never too late to fight back. It's never too late to fill your house with love.